Hello, this is Greg Allison with Green Greg's Garden and Worm Farm, and we're back again today with Dr. Paul Cottrell to talk about this COVID-19 SARS-CoV-2 virus that's affecting our world today. And there's just so much stuff out there going in so many different directions. There's a lot of chaff out there in the wind. So we're here today to pick through that chaff and try to find the wheat to figure out, one, what's really going on, two, what does it mean for us? How do we need to react, and what can we do about it personally? What can you do about it? What can I do about it? And so there's a whole lot of dimensions to this to cover. So I'm going to start this out by talking about the numbers, and I'm going to go in here and I'm going to do a share of what's out there right now on this Worldometer site. And what you can see here is that the USA numbers right now are, for total reported cases, 1,116 and 448. As you might recall, it's been 18 days since I've had Dr. Paul Cottrell on my channel. When he and I started that last video, there were 474 cases. 18 days ago, 474 cases. Now here we are 18 days later, and it's slightly more than 474, right? We're a few orders of magnitude above that. 1, 2, 3 orders of magnitude. This thing is growing really fast. And I'm going to show you how and what that means. I'm going to pull up a spreadsheet in a moment to talk that a little bit more. So, and furthermore, this is just starting in the United States, so the death rate may be lower than some of the other countries where this has been running for a few weeks longer. As you can see that we are total deaths about 1,900, and that's up about 250. You know, I'm rounding it off there a little bit. So we've got 2 countries now that have passed China, at least China's reported numbers, which I have very zero confidence in. That's how low. Negative confidence. China's got to be lying, and I can even show you that in my spreadsheet. It don't make any sense what they're telling us. So I can show you a number for what ought to be like their minimum death rate based on just what's going on in Italy. But China's had this longer, so it's actually be higher than what I'm going to show you. And there's reports that may indicate that that's in fact true. All that said, yeah, just 54 new cases. Yeah, right. So if we and how is it a country as small as Italy has got over 3 times more fatalities than a nation as large, the biggest, most populous nation on earth, where this thing started? It doesn't even make walking around sense. But then again, if you believe the CCP, then you may be beyond my help. I do not buy anything they tell me. So there you are. We are in a new regime, a new world with things progressing really fast. And to give you another idea of what that looks like, this progression, how explosive it is, one of the good things here that you can tell on the Johns Hopkins side is just look at this curve. Not only is it beginning to go up, but these dots are getting farther and farther apart. The fact that the dots are getting farther and farther apart means this is still accelerating. Now, the Johns Hopkins site reports a little bit lower case counts. They don't update as often as Worldometer. So here, as you can see, they're showing almost 650,000 total confirmed cases. And again, I think that's biased by severe underreporting in countries like China, by the fact that we still haven't tested widely here in the United States, and God knows what Iran's doing. You know, I don't have any faith in their numbers either. Any command totalitarian society reporting numbers is highly suspicious, to be very charitable about it. So all that said, now I've got a spreadsheet I'm going to pull up. Let me stop this share. Let me go to my spreadsheet, which I know y'all going to find quite interesting. And when we last talked with Dr. Paul Cottrell, did I do a share? I think I just opened it. I didn't share it. Hang on. Go back and share. Bam. There we go. Blow that up. There. You see that, Paul? When Paul and I last talked about 18 days ago, the reported cases were somewhere around here. Now, what this is this is a column in my spreadsheet that does doublets. And it starts with case 1, the first person, whenever that was. Wherever it was. You can think about this being the United States, any country, the whole world, however you want to look at it. This is just simply a doubling. There's no time factor on it. This is just telling you what happens when things double. You start with 1, you go to 2, 4, 8, 16. And if you look at the formula in the cell, it's simply the previous cell multiplied by 2. That's how doubling works. This is a simple mathematics. There's no regressions. There's no Monte Carlo curves. There's none of the fancy mathematics. This is just doublings. And where can it get you over time? This thing's double. Now, we are closer to this number now in the United States. So if you think about this in the United States, how many doublings, if other things were not, there's many factors that go into this. The rate of spread of disease is your R0 value, and that will vary according to social distances and practices you take and other things that happen. Maybe the change of seasons might vary that, but it looks like our doublings, based on, from the time here to here, is like every 2.5 days. Now, that's also prejudiced by the fact that we're doing more testing now than we were back here. So there's a lot of factors going into this. However, if you just project doublings forward for whatever it's worth, and it does appear in certain other countries like Australia and other places, they've been more doubling down on checking the doubling rate. And it looks like in some places it's 3 days. I say in some places. Again, that can vary according to the country, their customs and policies. So how many doublings would it take to go from here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 doublings, and you're past the population of the United States. So that would be sometime in April before Easter. And maybe that's why the president's picking on Easter. Is it going to happen by then? Probably not. I would imagine there's something that's going to slow it down, but it could. That's within the realm of possibilities. But we can talk about that in a moment. Now, this little column here is consuming a really high R0. What happens if your progression is ×4? And that's a valid model. You start with 1, you go to 4, 16, 64. You can see you get real fast to some big numbers. And if you get down, you can get down. Another progression I put out here. Now, 1 times 1 is always 1, so I had to start this one with 2. And this is where you just multiply a cell by the previous cell. And you just keep multiplying the cell times itself, basically, and you sum it up in the subsequent cell. And there's believed to be 10 to the 80 atoms in the universe, so you're real fast to exceed the atoms in the universe. So this shows the power of that's not going to happen, because anything's only going to expand as far and as fast as the resources available to it and the means to spread. If there's a resistance that's built in the system, that will slow it down. But how fast will the bacteria fill up the petri dish? I mean, it's not going to go past the walls of the petri dish, and once it consumes all the little substrate it grows on, that's it, right? But this tells you that the exponential growth is essentially an explosion. We tend to think linearly in our society, and even doctors and mathematicians sometimes fail to understand what geometric exponential progression is, what it means, what it can do, where it can lead you. The assumptions you have to make when you look at it. For example, if this is our caseload right now, if we have somewhere in this area of reported cases, and if the incubation period is 5 to 6 days, and then that means that the actual cases in the United States are somewhere between here and here, probably because you got to have 2 doublings for it to show up and have all these infections. So that means we're either over 500,000 or close to 1 million people already infected, and we may be this just because we haven't tested so much. So that would be like 1 in 300 people being infected. This is far shy of what Neil Ferguson is claiming in Great Britain. We'll talk about that in a moment. So, Paul, what do you think about this in terms of doublings and rates of growth? I can show you this other numbers over here in a moment. Just what's your take on that? Where we're at now with the numbers in the world, the United States, and how fast this thing can actually grow. What are you seeing?
Well, I think you're right. It's definitely going to be exponential. I mean, it's just bacteria and viruses grow exponentially, because if you look at just a cell, it's producing more than just 1 virus per cell that it infects, and produces lots of viral load, and then it explodes out of the cell and starts to infect other cells. So that's the reason, that's the histological reason of this, this exponential growth here at the one organism level. But as individuals start to spread these viruses, as they shed, in the population and people get infected, So there's you can see this at the very micro level, where it's how the virus is infecting the individual cell and that viral load building up in the individual, and then as they cough or spread the virus some way, that spreads through the population. Now, so I agree with you, and and a lot of people don't think. A lot of people when a lot of people when they see something, it may be some sort of evolutionary reason why we think this way, but we seem to project out or extrapolate linearly. We don't think non-linearly. It's very hard to extrapolate non-linearly. So, so at times people undershoot and overshoot when they extrapolate linearly, because complex systems are nonlinear, and they have exponential growth and they have exponential decay. All right, so so there's depending on the system, but I mean, so there's what will happen here is that there's going to be exponential growth, and then all of a sudden there's going to be an S, right? And that first derivative is going to turn 0, and then it'll start to come down and then start to accelerate down.
It's usually so charges and discharges. It charges up exponentially, but the discharge is logarithmic. It goes down like this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that's a good point. Is just that when you look at the function, the total function through time, it is exponential and logarithmic.
Right. So you get so for everybody to understand what this means is it explodes. You get a huge surge, and then it tapers off like that. Mm-hmm. Which you get a lot of area under this curve. There's a lot of stuff going on in here. But you do expect to see a taper off, and I'm kind of worried with some of the case numbers. If we go back to the world, let me stop this share and go back to what's going on in the other countries here, and we'll go back to the worldometer site, because I think that's a very.
Now I just want to add to something here. Now, what some of the individuals that are being interviewed on mainstream media, and I'm going to stress mainstream media, they're stating that, well, the reason why China's numbers are low and the reason why Korea's numbers are low are because they did a lot of testing and they did strict quarantine, and therefore the R0 value really dropped. Okay, and I just don't believe it. I don't believe that that they would be able to control 1.4 billion people in China.
I would tend to think Korea is more accurate than China. I think the South Korean society is more open, and I think they were very aggressive at first in testing and contact tracing and isolation. Given that,
here there are two different dynamics here.
Yeah.
Korea is like a state in the United States.
Right.
China, so if you're going to look at U.S. versus China, that's more realistic, even though China's much larger in terms of population. But a fairer comparison is New York State to South Korea.
Bingo.
Right. So that's we have to keep that in mind, that that we don't have some sort of internal fallacy when we look at data.
South Korea down here on this chart.
Right. So, and if we look at South Korea as the state of New York, for example, New York is over 20,000 cases. All right, and we have over 500 deaths.
So
they only have 144 deaths. So something is weird with that data. Now, as we talked before, and I've talked on other channels and in my channel, there are multiple receptors that this is affecting. It's not just the ACE2. And there has been a research study that came out that I think it was on February 27th when the paper was published. I didn't read it until last week. That there are 4 main receptors. Okay. And those 4 main receptors are GRP78, CD147, CD209, and CD299. The last two that I just mentioned are related to your immune cells.
Mm.
They also could be in the AT2 cells that are in your air sac, but they're primarily for the immune system. CD147 is also an immunoglobulin superfamily receptor, so that's tied to the immune system.
So this is not just.
So right, this is not just attacking your ACE2 receptors and your lung. It's attacking different tissues and different systems. That's the key here. Different systems, different organs, and your different organs are have different functions, but your immune system has a different function, right? It produces your antibodies. So if it's attacking immune system cells, then that would explain some of the clinical representations of a lower white blood cell count. Now, what is interesting here is that for a few individuals, it's a small percentage, they do get some sort of neurological infection similar to meningitis. Now, there's a debate on if that neurological neuritis, that we'll call it neuritis, okay, for lack of a better term. The neuritis, the question is it coming from the innervation of the organs, where some of the organs are infected and it's starting to creep up the vagus nerve from the organ level and causing neuritis? Or is it getting into the spinal fluid and going into the brain and causing neuritis from the central nervous system?
Oh my gosh.
So, I'm actually tonight talking to a neuroscientist about this particular issue, and we're going to dive into the top down versus the bottom up possibilities of neuritis.
Well,
so
to me, the initial symptoms might be more than what's being reported. I'm hearing initial symptoms of dry cough and difficulty breathing, temperatures. I've seen some suggest it would start with a sore throat. Could you get headaches?
Oh yeah, we have had this. That's one of the signs. Is severe headaches. They treat that. That's one of the early signs of it. They provide stronger medication for those severe headaches. And with some of these individuals that have the gliosis or some of this neuritis, the headaches are so bad that they're hitting their head on the wall.
Oh.
So that, only people that have like migraines, like really bad migraines to the point where it's suicidal, do that.
Oh
so
God.
There's definitely something going on with for some patients, not everybody. This is for some patients. See, this is the point that people need to realize, is that as more and more people get infected around the world, you're going to see different presentations of this, different clinical presentations. This is not cookie cutter. It's not all the same thing. It's COVID-19 is a disease caused by a virus called SARS-CoV-2. And different people, different phenotypes will, and ages will present this differently.
Paul, for the sake of my audience, maybe we should define some certain terms. What is phenotype?
So that's your genetic code will present in a physical way. Brown hair versus blonde hair. So brown hair is you have a brown hair phenotype. Okay. Now in your genome, because half of it is your mother and half of it is your father, unless you're alien, but half of it is your mother, half of it is your father, and then so there's dominance, and depending on which allele is presented physically, that's your phenotype. So you may have a genotype of brown and blonde from the mother, brown from the father, but brown is a dominant allele, a dominant trait Therefore, your phenotype is brown, but your genotype is brown blonde.
Yeah, well, I got to tell you, I always thought strawberry blonde was more blonde, but I've discovered it's really a redhead gene. And really and truly, when I get what do you call it? Where the anesthesia, when I get the anesthesia, it don't affect me. Things
Right.
that tell me I won't feel, I feel. Things that tell me I won't remember, I remember. So yeah, I'm kind of immune to this to that stuff.
That's
Painkillers
funny.
affect me the same. So I have a different reaction, and that's typical of redheads, gingers, as the British call us. So that's interesting. So pick back. Sorry, I probably got you off another track. I just, I've got a wide, broad audience here, and I just want them to understand the terms.
No, I understand. So, based on your phenotype and your genotype, depends on how and your age, how this will present itself clinically. So it's not cookie cutter. It's not cookie cutter. It's, there's the devil's in the details, and everyone's going to present slightly differently.
All right. So things that we may think are symptoms may not be the whole case, because I didn't know a headache was a valid symptom for this.
Mhm,
That's
mhm.
scary.
It's
All right.
usually the early onset.
You're thinking respiratory. You're not thinking, well, it's this. So you think, well, if it's this, maybe
Mm,
I just got an allergy, but maybe you're.
Well, the thought is that once you are infected, it's starting to produce pro-inflammatory cytokines, and those pro-inflammatory cytokines are actually affecting the glia cells in the head and causing the gliosis. That's one thought, and that might be true for certain cases. And then later, a few days later, you actually start seeing the pneumonia. There's a lot of cases you could test positive for COVID-19 and not have the upper respiratory infection, but have the diarrhea and have the headache, and then 4 days later start having the respiratory problems.
Okay, well, that's interesting, because people really need to know, and maybe that's a good point to bring up. What other markers would you look for? We mentioned sore throat, dry cough,
Sore
fever.
throat, dry cough, the fever is one. Achy. Some people, have that headache. They have the diarrhea. Maybe abdominal pain. But that could be a lot of things. That's the problem. Is that at the very beginning? This is why testing is important, and this is why if you can get to a doctor and you're not feeling well, and you're in an outbreak area, it's safe to assume that you're infected and that you need further testing to prove it. I don't want people to think that they have a bad stomachache and a headache, and they're in an infected area, that they automatically have COVID-19. That's not the case. But because you're in an area and we're in a pandemic, the probability of having it increases, and if you do have it, it has to be treated. This idea that people saying, "Oh, it's just the flu and it's going to be minor symptoms, just stay at home," that's fine if you look at the aggregate when you're trying to save resources in the society. But what if it's your child that has that and that child dies? It's a catastrophe. But big government, they look at that as a minor statistic. So you always have to err on this side of caution, and that side of caution is treatment. I've always promoted that. I don't like this idea that, oh, you feel somewhat bad, just stay at home. No, you need to go to the doctor and get treated. And this is where the government comes in and says, okay, they have facilities that people can go to make sure that they're not overloading the healthcare system, to be able to treat these individuals. Because this idea that, well, don't show up until you're coughing up your lung, I don't think is the right way to do it, because once you start getting on these ventilators, it's harder and harder to get off of them. You're already in a really bad situation if you're on a ventilator, all right? And the prognosis of your disease is dire, right? So I'm not saying that everyone that gets on a ventilator is going to die, no, but your chances of dying increase, and it's not linear, it's exponential. And getting off of the ventilator gets harder and harder. So, yeah, over time, as time goes on, when you're on these ventilators. So, um, people need. This is why boosting up your immune system is really important. This is why, taking those antivirals at the homeopathic level, once you start feeling sick, is important. So you can see a doctor and get, that stronger medicine.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we'll talk about treatments at the end here. So let's I just want to go back here. Let's go back and share. I thought I'd stop the share for a moment just because we were talking so much. So let me go back and reshare this site here. Oops. This over. So what I found interesting here is just given the long time of quarantine in countries like Italy, that they're still getting so many cases. And you would expect to see what we were talking about, a charge and discharge curve. You'd expect to see this starting to drop off because they'd been in quarantine for 3 weeks. And if you look at yesterday, it may have dropped off a little bit. New cases from yesterday in Italy, 5,909 new cases today. Well, it's more new cases. So that you can say it's not dropping off in Italy. It seems maybe it's leveling out. That may be a good thing, but that also may be just a function of getting the R naught down. But deaths, okay, so now deaths are 889. Well, they were 919, not far apart. It could be a slight decrease. That could just be a bump in the statistics. It's hard to know yet because it's still pretty close. If nothing else, Italy's at least leveling off, but in those cases, but it's still 3 weeks at least or better into quarantine in Italy, and they've got a pretty tight quarantine. So, I would have expected to see better numbers than that. So I really got to wonder, what does that mean when you've got a country that's under quarantine as tight as Italy, and you still see the new case and the death count running so high? What do you think about that? And what does that bode for us going? We've got a very lackadaisical shutdown schedule here in the United States, and just spotty quarantines of sorts. What do you think about?
Well, I mean, the United States is a big country. I mean, we have 330 million people, which is a lot. A lot of these countries that are on that list have populations much lower, except China. China has a lot more. So these individual countries are like a state in the United States.
They are very much.
So if you look at them, you can get an idea of how many deaths you're going to see in a state, roughly, assuming if we followed their protocols. But compliance is an issue. We saw compliance as being an issue last weekend when individuals in New York City, even though we were sheltered in place, went to Central Park and didn't do the social distancing. And the governor was right, scolding the mayor of New York, allowing that to happen. But here's the problem. I mean, me being in New York, in Manhattan, all right, it is becoming, there's a social, there's a psychological cost of shelter in place. You start going stir crazy.
Cabin fever. I lived on last.
Yeah. And I just and now we're in, people started self-quarantining to a certain degree 2 weeks before the shelter in place.
Right.
So you got to keep that in mind, that we've been sheltered in place for 2 weeks. All right. Plus a big section of the society was self-quarantining.
So that sounds a lot like.
So we're already so a lot of people in New York are already at the 4-week mark psychologically here.
Okay. So that puts you in a similar scenario I'm trying to paint with Italy here. I just don't have New York on my map, but you are having an explosion of cases in New York, even with the self-quarantine and even with the more recent quarantine. So,
well, yeah, part of the reason why we're having an explosion of cases is that we have a high throughput for testing. I mean, you're trying to test 1,000 a day. All right, so that's going to be, so we're still playing catch up on how many people really have it. Then you have that incubation period. And people need to understand. I want to explain something to individuals that most people don't understand this. In a Gaussian distribution or a normal distribution curve,
You got
you have you have you right you have standard deviations, and standard deviations is one standard deviation, two standard deviations, and three standard deviations. If you are quarantined for 14 days, that's only a one standard deviation. That's only 66% of the population. All right. So that means that about 33% of the population can still infect once you get everybody out of quarantine. If you go to two standard deviations, you'll be at 95%. So that means that 5% after the quarantine of 30 days would be possibly infecting. If you go to three standard deviations, that's around the 40-day mark. All right. And then you only have about half of a percent chance, a 0.5% of the population that's released. That's what I'm talking about. But a lot of people don't understand this. They just think, okay, 14 days, and then we're all okay. No, that's only dealing with one standard deviation.
Yeah, I'm hearing.
And and 30 days, which is a whole month, technically isn't really enough. That's why I keep on saying it's 40 days and 40 nights. And that will get you down to a point where it doesn't overload the medical system, where they can treat the disease in the population.
Was Noah's flood a water event or a viral event?
Well, who knows? Maybe it was both. Who knows? But here, the point here is this: that yes, when the quote the experts like Fauci, Dr. Fauci says, it's a 14-day, it's 14 days for quarantine, and the majority of the cases would self-correct from that. That's a true statement, because 60%, 66% is
majority
is the majority. But
right.
But the problem here is you got 30% of the population that's still in fact.
You got a bunch of people out here on this other limb that could reinfect.
Right. So that's why it's important to this. What is the term is smashing the curve instead of flattening the curve. You smash the curve with a three sigma quarantine, and with a 3 sigma quarantine, we'll get that down. Here's the problem:
40 days and 40 nights.
Right? Yeah. But here's the problem: that's 40 days and 40 nights with kind of strict strict lockdown, right, with very little movement in that society. And we already, and the thing is if you started it correctly, you'd have to start it now and then 40 days. You can't count the previous lockdown as part of the 40 days. That's the problem, is they started it wrong. Right. And you almost had to go back to time zero and do another 40 days. And this is where the psychological component comes in. People are getting fed up because the government is incompetent.
That's true.
And that now we're going to be quarantined.
They don't trust.
Not for 40 days. We're going to be quarantined for 60 days because they screwed up the first 20.
Yeah, and see, here's the other problem. People don't trust the government because the government has fooled people so many times and pulled so many shenanigans upon the population that people are jaded. They do not trust the government. And as you said, they're already incompetent. So one part of their incompetence, in my humble opinion, is they're talking about, starting to open the floodgates again right after Easter. And that's far too early. There is no way they're going to get there. And all that means they might slow things down temporarily, but then it's just going to reignite. They're going to have some real problems. So if you're going to have a total shutdown to fix this, you've got to really get with it. But a lot of people, because a lot of people believe things they want to believe. And so when you get somebody out there like Neil Ferguson saying, oh, well, all the masks are on because most of the people are already infected, and because most people aren't infected, case fatality rate is minuscule, and this thing's going to be over in a couple of weeks. So you might make national policy based on that today, but if you're wrong, the price you're going to pay is going to be astronomical in deaths and sickness, inability to smash the curve, and the hospitals getting overwhelmed. And, you know, if I were in Britain, you know, I think I might be among the mobs at his door, you know, when all this it goes down, because I'm expecting he's entirely wrong. I don't see how he understands math. He doesn't understand the power of doublings of exponential growth rates. And the guy's supposed to have a PhD and research things. He's supposed to be an epidemiologist. And, you know, I'm just really thinking that this guy's missing.
Well, you know, let me dissect that a little bit. All right, with my you know, my personality. You know, these epidemiologists, they were trained under normal circumstances.
Ah,
And and this is not a normal circumstance virus. You know, and this is the problem, that, you know, they're looking at something that that's, you know, the normal flu, even H1N1 or SARS or Ebola. They all had different dynamics, but we're talking about things that were zoonotic. I've been stating from day one, this is not zoonotic. This is much more virulent. This is designed to kill. I mean, I'm trying to use words so people start waking up. This is designed to kill.
so we might as well go into it. You said it there, so you might as well just wrap that tangent up right now, because a lot of people are now citing studies that comes back and says, "Oh no, this is zoonotic. We got the proof. Here's the paper." I don't want you to spend 2 hours. I know you can. So
I did.
and it's
Right.
to assassinate that concept that it's not that it's zoonotic. So yeah, that was my little talking point: zoonotic or not here. So you might as well jump on into that now. Zoonotic or not? What say you, Dr. Paul?
Okay, it is not zoonotic. I can prove it's not zoonotic. I
Right.
can talk for 10 hours on why it's not zoonotic. You know, but the bottom line is that I have a paper that's on my website that people can download that shows back in 2008 that shows in the methods, the materials and methods section of the paper on how they made the virus. All right, it's very simple. All you got to do is read it, and it's by Dr. Ping Zhao. All right, he's one of the researchers, and the other 4 researchers on the paper, they're all coming from Wuhan Institute, and that's where the P4 lab is.
Institute of Virology, and I did a program, a show on Dr. Ping Zhao over a month ago on my channel, where I talked about him and I dubbed him as the real Batman.
Right. Exactly.
Virus
You know,
killer.
so you know, there are many different researchers that are tied to this, but there are some key players. He's one of the key players. All right, and I've been saying this from day. And who actually leaked the name was Lisa Haven, because she was doing some research, and I was able to take the name that she mentioned and then look in the database with the different papers and then start seeing the trail.
I got it
So,
from
you know,
I found it on Zero Hedge initially.
well, I mean, she might have been quoting from Zero Hedge, but I was listening to her, and you know, that's how things work here. But here, you know, but the bottom line is that there are papers that have been published a decade ago or more that show that they were doing this scientifically. All right, and that this
The 2008 paper you mentioned. Just say a little bit about that 2008 paper. What were they doing?
okay, so they were trying to understand why bat SARS-like virus and SARS virus were not as virulent with the human ACE2 receptor. And so what they did was they made a pseudovirus with HIV and showed that when you combine all these together, when you take the best of both, you know, all the worlds, that it adds to the virulence with human ACE2 receptor. That's what that paper states. All right. So, and that shows on how they were building it.
So the paper actually states that.
Yes. So, and it shows how they built the suit, what they call the pseudovirus construct. So, you know, HIV construct. So, you know, that's right there. So going back to the recent paper that was published in Nature, I did a video read it live in real time, not prepared, because that's how confident I am on this. I read word for word of that paper from Nature, okay, that was just published, stating that it was zoonotic, or they thought it was. They stated as they think it's zoonotic. They can't prove it. They put that near the end. All right, but the thing is that I read it word for word, and the 25 different things that I found wrong with the paper, on why I believe it. And now when you zoom out, all right, there are some funny things that are going on. There is incentive for the CCP to try to prove that it's zoonotic, because the world at large finds out and accepts the fact that it was bioengineered. That's a huge backlash on the Chinese government. There is the bottom line is there is a cover up. There's a cover up at the CCP level. There's a cover up at the WHO level. And that's a serious problem. That is a big problem. So there's incentive to cover it up through the scientific community. And it's going to get harder and harder to find the needles or the Lego pieces that I was mentioning all the way back in January 25th. All right. But if you go to my videos and you look at the screenshots, they give you the code for the genome of these pieces. So as long as you have those genome codes, you can find it in the database. But when you do a simple blast search, because we are sequencing more and more Wuhan, the homologies are going to be more and more Wuhan related or RATG13 related, and not as related to the constructs that they used. All right. So my point is that over time, the needle that I was showing you in January is going to be harder and harder to find by simple blast querying. Advanced querying, you'll be able to see it, but you would have to have a paper to look for it, or some reference to look for it.
What you're looking for.
Exactly. And that's why that Indian paper that they pulled down, that was the HIV homology paper that was published, was so important. Because if it wasn't for that, people wouldn't know what to look for specifically. Because what is interesting on the Nature paper that was just released, they only talk about 4 amino acids by the in the spike protein area that was part of. That's only 1/2 of the gag insertion. They didn't mention anything about glycoprotein 120 insertions. They only mentioned 1/2 of the gag insertion. All right, and I find that really odd. Now, what is really important in that paper is that they at least admit that the gag insertion, the HIV gag insertion, allows for furin, which I was talking about before, is the protease that cleaves the protein to allow for the S spike to become more virulent. So if it wasn't for that cleavage point, or what they call in the paper polybasic cleavage, that's a fancy term for the furin protease uses that topology on the protein to cut, and now you have 2 pieces of the protein and it folds, and that allows it, that topology of that folding allows it to be virulent for the human H2. So so that's tied to the paper that I'm mentioning in 2008. So there's so many holes in that research. And then the very first citation that they have in that paper is to Dr. Piang Zhao, who has an incentive to bury the program.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
So Now, so people understand where I'm at right now, because science is a moving thing, and then you get new information and you recycle your hypothesis and right? That's the scientific method. And I've stated I've been using the scientific method. I don't have a dog in the show here, right? So this is where I'm at right now. There was a scientific line that was developed. It seems to been around 2007 or 2008, the genesis of that. And there was some sort of bifurcation in the development. And the scientific line continued to be developed. And I believe in parallel to that scientific development, there was a weapons line that was being developed that started around 2015. And the question is, what leaked out? I don't care if it was leaked out on purpose or on accident. It was leaked out. The question is, what leaked out? Was it the scientific line or was it the weapons line? Because I'm starting to think, based on what I'm seeing with the RATG13 line, because it has similar homology, but enough differences that you could say that they were running in parallel. Okay, and that the Wuhan virus is more virulent. It seems to be more virulent than the RATG13 line. So my working hypothesis is this: the RATG13 line was not zoonotic; it was made, because there is no evidence going, because this was supposedly found in 2013. There's no evidence of it being found in 2013. And if it was made, or pieces of it, was constructed way back in 2013, do you think if you're doing a weapons program or even, advanced research, that you wanted proprietary, do you think that they're going to sequence that and give it to the NIH? Of course not. So where did RATG13? I can't find any paper anywhere that states RATG13 in any database until February 24th of this year. And the nomenclature of that is stating that it existed in 2013.
All right. So
now,
a couple things for the audience. Define homology.
That's when you look at the sequence of the genome and you compare it to another organism or another virus, in this case, how much similarity, how much A's match with another A, how much T's match with another T, how much G's in the right area, location in the genome.
The base word of harmony, like harmony, homology.
Yeah, well, it's it's basically how much does it? If you looked at two circles, all right, and you did a union, a complete quote homology would be them overlapping completely. But if it's partially only overlapping, then they only have a certain percentage of homology.
Got it. So it's like set theory.
Yeah. You can look at it from that point of view.
Okay, very good. So, yeah, this my audience needs to sometimes understand what we're talking about with the terminology here. So I thought, this time I better slow down and get a few terms defined. So let's go forward then. You had talked about these multiple pathways that this thing has more than the ACE2 inhibitor, the ACE2 receptor to attach to. That this virus can come into us like 4 different ways, and so that's fairly novel in and of itself. But you've also indicated that might make it more virulent among Caucasians. So
yes,
tell me about it. And what is the future? And you'd also talked to me in the past about this thing could keep evolving because these other means it has of entering to our cells, because it has proteins that can give it access to other receptor sites on our cells, that this may evolve and keep coming back again and again, 3 years, 5 years at a time for the God knows how long. But we may be living with this for a long time. So just go into all that. What does that mean in terms of its means to infect us today, in terms of its means that maybe it's targeted to Caucasians, and what does it mean for future infections?
Okay, so the primary receptor where the research has led us is ACE2. And ACE2 is more upregulated for males and individuals that smoke. On prior shows, I've mentioned, based on the research, that it seemed at that time that it was targeting Asian males. The reason was a lot of Asian males smoke, so they are upregulating ACE2. Okay, so it is gender-wise, if you're looking at just ACE2, it's male. Now, this virus can attack that's known so far, 4 different receptors. It'll get even more complicated when I talk about the blood type, but let's just stick with the 4 receptors right now. So the 4 receptors this can attack. It doesn't mean that each receptor has the same affinity. It seems, based on the current research, that the ACE2 receptor has the most affinity. Okay, so that means that it's going to attack males more, especially smokers. All right, but if you're a female and smoke, you'll upregulate ACE2. All right, but maybe not as much as if you were a male smoker. So your risks increase if you're a smoker. Your risks increase even if you're not a smoker and you're just male. Okay, but there's other components to this. So just looking at the receptor point of view, there is affinity to other receptors. And these other receptors, 3 of them, involve the immune system. 2 of them are the other one, the GRP 78 receptor, is a chaperone receptor inside the cell that moves unfolded proteins to the endoplasmic reticulum to help fold and go through post-process to get to the right structure, because they're inactive when they're not folded.
So
But when your cells are stressed,
more efficient at replicating.
well, I mean, we can go. I mean, the chaperone. What happens is this GRP 78 protein is in our cells, and when we make protein from our messenger RNA, those proteins are not folded yet. So they have to be chaperoned into the endoplasmic reticulum, cut, folded, modified, and then they're transported out to the Golgi apparatus, and the Golgi apparatus will start to maybe move it to the cell surface, or that they may be excreted out of the endoplasmic reticulum and float around for different processes within the cell. But the GRP
for shop people we might call that the protein jig shop, you know.
Yeah. It's transporting it to a organelle for further post-processing of the protein. Okay, but when the cell is
inside of a cell, for those that don't know, an organelle, like your mitochondria, for example, the cells have various organs within them. We call them organelles, and they're little sacks of material with attributes that enable them to do whatever function is that they have to do.
Right. So these chaperone proteins, one of them is the GRP78. If the cell is stressed, and there's a buildup of unfolded proteins, it'll upregulate more of the GRP78. All right. And as that happens, it moves up to the cell surface. Well, they found that if it's up at the cell surface, the spike protein of this virus can attach to it. So if you have cellular stress, you're increasing, and that's why I keep on saying that health matters. If you have half of your society unhealthy, you got more GRP 78. That's the point I'm making.
Well, it's probably a lot.
This is the biological mechanism of part of the reason why. This is one of many, but this is why it's important to be healthy.
Well, I would imagine all the stress in New York City, you're probably the GRP 78 capital of the universe.
It could be, it could be, but okay, but okay. So we have that issue. So you have all these different receptors that with different affinities. Okay, but the CD 209 and the CD 299 are primarily immune receptors. But 209 is also on lung tissue in the air sac. They are upregulated for smokers. They're upregulated for whites.
Really?
So Caucasian. So here's the issue is now you have a receptor that's ACE2 that's focused, that's upregulated with smokers and males, and you have two receptors that are upregulated if you're smoking and white, but they could be upregulated just by being white, because it's all relative. If you're comparing to Asians, more individuals will have CD299 that are white versus, but then if you add in the smoking component, then it's upregulated even more. But if you add the stress component, then you have more GRP78. So it's a complex system, and you and I know what that means. So when you have all these things happening, you have a nonlinear event. You have a chaotic situation. You have a black swan, right?
Yeah.
So basically,
let me ask you: in 2008, were they smart enough to know what which of these receptors would have more affinities for Caucasians, and would have known how to fold proteins for like the spike proteins, or how to design viruses with spike proteins that would have affinities for those receptor sites?
I don't believe back in 2008 when they were designing this, that they knew what they were playing with in terms of the CD2099 and the CD209 receptors. They were more focused on making a spike protein that attached to human ACE2 receptors only. I think as the research progressed over a decade, they started learning on this emergent property. I'm willing to believe, I'm willing to, my mind is at the point right now on a scientific line, okay, that they were designing something to infect only ACE2, okay? Then as time goes on, as you get to 2015, they realized that this also affects the immune system, similar to glycoprotein 120 of AIDS, of HIV. All right, it has similar dynamics. And from there, that's when they start the weapons program.
Okay, so when they started the weapons program, they had all this knowledge in their holster, and they used it. They put it together.
And they tweak it. They're tweaking it in the weapons program.
So then you would say they've tweaked it so it would be would attack other populations. Or do you think they would have had a vaccine for their dear leaders before they released this thing? Or
well, I mean, if the only ones that, with the assumption that the only ones that were doing the weapons program were the Chinese, then they have a biological weapon where you first infect. Think about this. You first infect. This goes into the realm that maybe they leaked it on purpose. First, you infect the population in Asia. They build up an antibody, all right, that is for ACE2, all right, affinity of the spike protein. And then as it's infecting the rest of the world, the ACE2 is the primary receptor, but over time, it's going to lose affinity. We call attenuation, which is what normally happens, all right, with viruses. But now as it's losing affinity, it has the potential to gain affinity towards these 4 other receptors, all right? And right, and you got, so just through probability, the second wave might be worse in Western societies because of their ethnicities. So when the second wave hits, or the tertiary wave hits Asia, it's not going to be as virulent because they don't have as many receptors. They don't have the same sensitivity.
Okay.
They already have the antibody for the first wave.
So that's true for the general population. So, so maybe, just talking, you could call it this a live, action role play, LARP session. But just thinking out loud and considering the possibilities. If that's the case, then maybe they designed something that would give them a little hit, but it would mainly hit other places. However, you would think the leadership of a country that's doing this would want to at least inoculate themselves from being attacked by their own agent. So would they have had?
Well, they might have, maybe over time they would be able to have the remdesivir, or maybe they knew that a good percentage of the individuals using hydroxychloroquine would work. They have such large numbers in their population, they could easily lose 20 million. That's the point. Is that they're working with large numbers, the power of large numbers.
Well,
we don't have that. We don't have that luxury.
Okay, they have a disproportionate ratio of male to female, so I'm sure they don't mind losing a few guys. They've got an age population is something a command society or any society just pays out money for. They're not warriors. They're not productive in society. That's just kind of what you're dragging along in terms of the economics. I'm looking at from purely a command economy economic standpoint, not the human aspect of it. So don't jump on me for that. I purely believe we should value all human life. Now, that said, I'm just looking at for how a command society might look at it in aggregate numbers. Like you said, even in the United States, they look at us not as individuals, but in aggregate numbers, and governments do that. And command societies are less sensitive to individual humans than say, we are. So all that said, here's what I feared a couple months ago, and I actually mentioned this in one of my videos. What if they infected themselves first, so that everybody would think that they couldn't release this as a weapon because it hit them, but then the plan might have been, or it could have been accidental. The plan may have been to infect themselves first, and then when it got out to, they would know that they would be uniquely able to lock their society down far better and far tighter than Western society and contain it after it spread a certain amount. That said, if they could do that, and then this thing spread out in Western society, which was not as able to contain itself, and if it had more receptors to attack us harder, when it's burning out here, and then we're knocked down to our feet, then they've got the world to play with. The world is their oyster. They can do whatever they want.
You want to hear something interesting? You've worked with you've worked with epoxies, right? Like so you have component A and B, you mix them together and it changes, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
All right, so it's very possible that when the war happens in the Pacific between the United States and China in 2015, which is what I think is going to happen, that this is only Unit A. I'm sorry, 2025. In 2025, I think there's going to be a war with the Chinese and the United States and the Pacific Ocean. But this is related. No, but this is related. This wave that we're seeing is only Unit A of the epoxy. Another unit is going to be released that sets in motion this cascade. There's another component to this. It's a lot of people were thinking, well, what it is it maybe it's a virus, and then they give you a vaccine and it makes it worse. I think there's some evidence of this during the Vietnam era, with I'm thinking that it's even way beyond that. The cytokine storm, I'm thinking that I'm thinking that if you are infected with another virus, a different type of virus, all right, we're never going to get rid of this virus in our body.
Really?
All right. No, it's never going to. It's going to
stop. That's important to talk about. I understand a retrovirus. A retrovirus goes into your own DNA and it stays there dormant. It becomes part of you, part of your code. And then when you're under stress, it comes out and makes more viral particles. You shed the viruses, and then you get sick, and then eventually it goes back and embeds itself in your DNA where it hides out again. Now, the coronavirus is a different animal. It's not, or a different thing. They're not animals. coronavirus is a different thing entirely. And it's not a little viral particle like a retrovirus. It's this big, ginormous ball, spiky ball. It does not embed itself within your DNA. So how does it remain in your system? I'm not saying it don't, but how does it?
Okay. All right. So you're right with the retroviruses. They can get integrated in your genome. That's one way. The thing is the viral load could be so low, it doesn't give you symptoms. And your immune system keeps it down. But there is small production levels.
It's still in you, what you're saying.
Yeah.
It'll stay in you.
Yeah. Or in tissue that doesn't do a lot, that they're almost like, we have tissue that's kind of dormant. All right. And they could be infecting those tissues and it just stays, it's in the cell, but it's not multiplying until something happens.
So
until there's enough.
So larger viruses do that, not just retroviruses?
Just because someone tests negative for, let's say, a virus, doesn't mean that the virus is not in your body. It's just that they can't find it.
Okay, so there are viruses that will stay in your body for long times and live and survive and just not be active other than retroviruses.
This is part of the reason why that they can't find, let's say, certain people that let's say HIV. All right, they may have had a high viral load in their lifetime, but over time, for some reason, because of the cocktail they're taking, different lifestyle changes, whatever, that it's so low that they can't detect it. It doesn't mean they don't have it.
So, but it's not.
So
is HIV a retrovirus? That's what.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. But there's the same thing. You can have herpes.
And herpes.
Herpes is retro, right? But but the point I'm making is that you may have that you can have viruses in your body that stay dormant and don't do anything, or the viral load on the whole organism is so low that you're always asymptomatic, and you're living with it. If the virus attenuates, is another thing that we got to remember is viruses change. There's a high mutation rate. So this thing can mutate to the point where it can mutate to a point where it just floats around. It's kind of like it becomes symbiotic with the organism. And that's what happens with the bad. That's what happens with the bad.
That would be the goal of any virus, to become symbiotic.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Oh my God.
So over time, viruses end up learning to live with the host.
All right. So part of what Ping Zhao, part of what Ping Zhao was doing was determining why was it that the SARS virus could survive so long
in the bat. Yes. And that's why they were trying to bring it underneath. You got it.
Maybe that was done to figure out how to develop a dormant virus.
Well, I think, like I said, is that it starts as a scientific line, but then the powers that be realize the potentiality of a weapons program. And that's why I say it bifurcated in 2015, and that there was two developments going on. There was a scientific development for a vaccine program or a therapeutic program, and there was a weapons program. And Francis, Boyle has talked about this, but he focused only on the weapons line. While, for most of my channel, I've been focused on the scientific line, but it's not mutually exclusive. Both of them happened. That's the point I'm making.
Okay. So it's starting to make a little sense of what Ping Zhao was researching. Yeah, the whole idea of having a virus that would live within you dormantly, that's not a retrovirus, just wasn't on my radar scope. So you just kind of laid that at my foot right now. But it doesn't in bats, so I guess it could. But see, here's the other thing that strikes me, Paul, and it's that coronaviruses are not known to mutate as fast as other viruses. So maybe they pre-integrated this virus with the other attributes, these other proteins, spike proteins, that would enable it to come in through other receptor sites. So
Well,
it didn't have to evolve. It's already pre-integrated, and it would have a predisposition to evolve in these directions.
well, that's why I think that inserted HIV is the key of what you're saying.
Well, how much?
It's not a retrovirus, but it has pieces of the spike protein of HIV.
Wow. So
that's the thing, and a lot of people don't get that.
Wow. Okay. That's nuts. So yeah, the only way you could, I don't see how you get that naturally. And in fact,
no, you just think about the probability of that. It's just it's so astronomical to say that was zoonotic, and then you still can point to a paper that says this is how they made it.
Well, there you go. You got your smoke right there.
Right.
So, and the other thing,
it's not a smoking gun. It's a gigantic nuclear warhead. I mean, yeah, I mean, right.
So yeah, let's look at this and think about all these proteins you just talked about that it gives it access to different receptors that we have. You ever have a coronavirus that just naturally evolves? Have we had one that we know of that has so many attributes like that?
What we did, no, we don't. There's none whatsoever that shows that it has that many attributes that was able to jump to a species like humans. Okay, now here's the thing. We've had zoonotic episodes. We've had SARS, right? We've had MERS. But those were all zoonotic. But the thing is it didn't have all the special pieces put together.
That's my point.
It's the best of all the different virus systems. That's why I keep on saying the Wuhan virus is supercharged.
That does make it sound like a weapon.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Very potent, virulent.
But I don't think it started as a weapon, because if it started as a weapon, they wouldn't have been publishing the papers. It's the papers that set the scientific line, and then the Department of Defense, their Department of Defense, somehow decided, you know what, this could be used as a weapon if needed. And it probably was leaked out on accident. But the bottom line is that it's still a weapon.
Sir Martin Rees, when he wrote this book back in, I think 2008, 2003, somewhere way back there, he, for those that don't know, and I mentioned in my on this channel before, Sir Martin Rees is the astronomer royal of Great Britain, which means he's the top astronomer, and he's a physicist. He is a top physicist, one of the world's top physicists. And he wrote this book because he had a lot of concerns. Now, in England, when he originally released this book, he called it The Final Century, but he knew the short attention span of Americans. The publishers told him he had changed the name to something more immediate. So he called it The Final Hour. He wrote this book in 2003. So this book is 17 years old. But he talked about the prospects. One of the things that worried him the most, a lot of scientific experiments that could go awry, where you've got researchers making their own calculations of risk and probabilities, and not really taking our interest into account. But one of the biggest things he was concerned about was the prospects for what he called bioterror and bioera. And the bioera is the accidental release. And that was his biggest concern in this book. And he thought we would not survive. He thought there's a 50% chance that we as a species couldn't survive the next century due to the prospects for that. And Paul, I got to tell you, I came to similar conclusions. That's why I find that book very interesting. Just prior to that book being published, I was involved in developing rockets, hybrid rockets, to be launched from high altitude balloons. And we've done it. We've launched rockets from altitude balloons. We made a Guinness Book of World Records for our first rocket launch. We call it the High Altitude Liftoff Sky Launch 1, HALO SO1. And we made a Guinness Book for that launch. I've done other launches since then. Been out to boats with these big scientific polyethylene balloons, that stand over 100 feet tall, and inflate them. And I hung, 300-pound packages underneath them. And I realized that here we were initially working out of a garage, two garages. We had one garage for avionics development. Back then, we didn't have all the stuff that you got in your cell phones and GoPro cameras, and the GPSs weren't as good. So we didn't have all the tools at disposal that people have these days. The kids are doing a lot of these balloon flights now. But we were at the cutting edge of this over 20 years ago. We started this program launching these things in 1994. Our first rocket launch was Raccoon launch was in 1997. But what I realized is here we were 40 years later than when superpowers, the only nations on earth that could do what we were doing was the United States and Russia. And they spent billions of dollars to do what a small group of young guys was doing in a couple of garages, working part-time on a shoestring budget of $20,000. We, with $20,000, working part-time on a shoestring budget, hit space. It took a superpower to do that previously, and it started my mind working. So, oh my God, what does that say about the proliferation of technology? And what I got from that was, you can't stop it because there's just too many people, too many minds. You're not going to stop it. You might stop certain materials like radioactive materials, but you're not going to stop the proliferation of technology. And what became immediately apparent after that was there was about this same time frame, a virologist who ordered a genome for a virus off the internet, and he ordered all the constituent parts and he built it in his lab. What a lot of people don't realize is a lot of these labs can be essentially built in a garage with a little bit of funding, not too different from what we were doing with our rockets then, which means weapons of mass destruction technology is widely available now to a vast number of groups and organizations all over the world. So what this really gets to is, how do we as a society survive and go forward for very much longer with all the hatreds that we have in the world, with all the power play games? Nations, by their definition, exist to compete with each other in many degrees. And you get countries like China who are very expansionist, and other countries that's got their agendas. Somehow we've got to find a way for the people to break through that. And the answer is not a one world government, which would be the ultimate tyranny that would oppress us all and make us all wish we were just worker ants instead of whatever they'll turn us into, which would be far worse, I'm sure, in time, because power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So I have no faith in systems like that, which seems to be where everybody wants to go. And the argument may be to go there because of just what I was talking about, but that's where the solution is worse. The cure is worse than the disease by far. And I'm going on about that. But see, that put me in the thought experiment of where we're going. And I realized back then that we would wind up where we are today. That these kind of things would be happening, to bioweapons were the primary things that we'd have to worry about. So if small groups can, what can countries do? I mean, they had the Level 4 Virology Institute there in Wuhan. The Wuhan Virology Institute was the name of it. And they were already doing research in this area. So the idea that they could do this stuff is no stretch by any measure. Given that years earlier, people were actually assembling viruses from components ordered over the internet, from genomes ordered over the internet. And you could do this in a lab that's not as sophisticated as a lot of people think. In fact, a lab to make silicon chips has to be a little bit more sophisticated than a lab to do this, I would submit. All that said, especially today with CRISPR technology and all the technology we have, I could definitely see us. I read a book some time back about just some guys who went up to, it was a fiction story of of an environmentalist group that thought there were too many people on Earth, so they went up to Svalbard up in above the Arctic Circle, where bodies were buried below the permafrost in the 1918 flu. They dug these bodies up and cultured this flu and released it on the world to get the population down. So the idea that somebody might do something like this, different people with different agendas might come up with something like that, is not alien. My takeaway from this is that we've got to learn to get along. We've got to learn to make peace with each other. That all this tensions and warfare fanning and all this fighting we're doing today is highly destructive. We spent $7 billion on a war on terrorism, yet we didn't have we didn't have face masks for doctors and medical staff here in the United States. We didn't have test kits, and we don't have enough ventilators. Yet we spend $7 trillion on a war on terrorism because we blame some guys for bringing down a couple of towers and killing a few tens of thousands of people, which is a terrible thing. The question is who did it and how did it happen and what went on in World Trade Center 7. There's a lot of questions in my mind about all that. But all that said, what we're doing every time we go in and put a drone strike on somebody because we want to take out one guy, and you kill an entire wedding party of aunts, uncles, grandmas, grandpas, you make a whole city mad. You create a whole new crop of terrorists. So all we're doing is fanning the flames. We're not we're not doing it right. We're fanning the flames. We're making it worse and worse and worse. You may disagree with those people. You may agree that that person's a problem, but the way we're dealing with it is not right. It's not morally right. It creates more problems and tensions, and we're going to reap it down the road. And with the world, the kind of technologies that we have on our fingertips, that is a potential catastrophe. And I did a video specifically on this, and I called it a nuke in every pot. That is something that people ought to go look at. But I talked specifically about it. I also did a video where I talked specifically about the fragility of our civilization. And I used the 1950s story of eye pencil, talking about how complicated it was to make a number 2 pencil, even back in the 1950s. I'm looking for one right now. So I basically held up a number 2 pencil in the thumbnail and talked about how that propagates in society. We're an incredibly fragile society. And with all the supply chains shutting down, we're liable to have some real problems with that today. We've become too dependent, especially too dependent on countries that are not our friends. So, all right, I've kind of ranted on with that. So, Paul, sorry.
No, don't worry about it. But the thing is that another component of it, not only having individuals, fighting each other for various reasons, there is the scientific hubrism, that takes place where they think that they know all and not understand that, some catastrophic thing can happen
and
that they didn't think of.
Sir Martin Rees admits that in here. He admits that. So you got to give them.
And I'm a little bit more worried about. Honestly, I'm more worried about the scientific hubrism than I am of the terrorists. Because at least the scientific hubrism is the unknown unknown. The known known is the terrorist.
You're right. Okay, so that brings up something that I've been pinging. Somebody in their infinite wisdom decided it was a good idea to create in their laboratories a human transmissible bird flu. Bird flu has a case fatality rate of 50 to 60%. So why would you want to create on this planet's surface in our biosphere in a laboratory where you might have the bioera and it get loose, a human transmissible bird flu? Not once, but twice. There's a laboratory in the Netherlands and a laboratory in Indonesia that has that. That's insane. Insane.
I think what they're starting to realize is they're making things that are actually beyond P4. And we need this concept that if it's a human, engineered virus, that has super virulence, that may need to be, it needs to be, a P5. And that protocols for P5 need to be way tighter than P4.
Don't do it.
Make sure it doesn't happen.
Don't even do it on Earth. Don't do it in our biosphere. The advantage of the moon is that it's never going to fall on Earth. It's always moving away from us. So,
yeah, but then we'll never be able to populate the moon, because it's going to be biotrashed.
Really, the moon doesn't have a biosphere. The moon is sterilized by the sun. It's in basically a nuclear environment.
Well, there's got to be. I do believe in panspermia. And that so there some things, either chemicals, amino acids, something can survive through through asteroid going through the solar system and so panspermia. I think there's something to panspermia.
Well, see, go to my Galactic Greg's channel, and for those that are listeners that hadn't been there, Galactic Greg's without an apostrophe, because there's another Galactic Greg's that's got an apostrophe. That's mine don't. Go to the Galactic Greg's channel without an apostrophe. Click on videos, so you see all the videos and not just that little bitty playlist which has nothing on it. And you will see where I did where Dr. Richard Hoover made a presentation in Huntsville, Alabama L5 Society, and he did quite a briefing on this. He shows tons of photographs of things found in meteorites collected in Antarctica that looks just like algae. Not one, not two, scads of photographs. He's got, and he shows you this compared to the organisms we have. I mean, I think he's got the smoking guns that show you that panspermia is real. And he's a scientist. He's been quite involved with this for an entire career. He's got scads of samples of this stuff. Now they try to tamp him down. They don't want this to get out. But he's
there's research papers that Crick wrote before he died about panspermia and how you know, when it came to the actual DNA molecule and the evolution of it, he said that it was much, much older than actually the planet Earth.
Well,
That he thought that it was pieces of the amino acids and the things that certain components that builds up the DNA molecule, came through panspermia. And it just shows you that the evolution is a very, very long and deep process, you know. But let's see, but that was stuff that he was, publishing in I think it was the 60s, before he died.
right. He said basically that to have DNA evolve, DNA is so critically complex, to have it evolve out of a mud puddle with some lightning and wave action was
in 4 billion years.
like, yeah. He said it was about like expecting the tornado to go through a junkyard and assemble a fully functional 747.
Right. But if you're looking at time scales that are, 14 billion years, then it makes sense.
Yeah, and you got the whole universe as a petri dish for things to work. Now, given all that and what we just said, I do believe in a greater creator, and I've said that several times before, but I do think that the greater creator is far more vast and complex than a lot of us realizes, and uses processes that are beyond our comprehension. So that does not negate what we just said, my belief in a greater creator. A lot of people think that, when you start talking this kind of stuff, you're anti-God, they start jumping on, he don't believe, he's this, he's that. No, I don't even go there. If you think that, your mind is too small to even argue or discuss this stuff. I know I'm going to get people jumping on me now, especially my flat Earth friends. I can't, they're beyond my help. I'm going to stick Galactic Greg's on them one of these days. So, all right. So these multiple pathways, essentially, that we've been talking about, leave the prospects for this thing to hit us in more ways right now, to make us more affected, apparently to make it last longer, and to keep coming back. So in different forms. So it's looking to me like we might get some respites, some reprieves from time to time, some seasons of sun, but this is with us. It's here to stay. And what I'm seeing, what has occurred to me, Paul, is that this really is the beginnings of a change of a way of life, that we've got to learn how to live differently. We've got to learn how to incorporate and live with quarantine and social distance. And it might mean, and I'm advocating the development of communities and tribes. Maybe you've got a small nucleus of people. If you can vet these people and bring them in, and then basically have them in like a quarantine cell. And if somebody has to go in or out from time to time, you put them over in isolation for some period of time till they're clean, before you fully reintegrate them into your core group. But at least you can still be human within this core group and be social and have some of the things that we as social beings enjoy. In terms of, hey, people like a hug. They say you need 14 hugs a day just for mental stability. And I think maybe we're mentally unstable society because we don't give each other 14 hugs a day. I mean, we're mammals. Mammals require social interaction. We have a heart. We believe in love, and that probably comes from the greater creator. So, in fact, that's what I believe. But that's just, I can't prove that. That's just what I believe. And people can jump on that all they want. I don't care. That's not what we're discussing here. All that said, I do think we need enclaves where we can have social lives, but we're not going to be able to do it the way we used to. We've got to rethink that, re-engineer it. We've got to re-engineer how we live. And there'll be more things like work at home. I think work at home is an opportunity, because if we adjust more to a work at home society, then you don't require all the office space. You don't require driving back and forth so much. You're not stressing people out so much. And we just said stress is a problem with that GRP78 protein, right? So the less we stress people, the healthier they may be. Driving back and forth to work is definitely a stressful thing. Fighting traffic, you could save gas. You could save on wear and tear of your vehicles, on wear and tear of the highways. There won't be as much requirement for highway maintenance, for highway expansion, because traffic should be less. All the office space that's been required wouldn't be needed. Companies wouldn't need overhead budgets nearly as large as they need today. They could be leaner and meaner and more competitive. You just have to have the tools and the means, which are definitely doable and havable, to make sure your people are actually working at home. But that's entirely doable. And it's certainly cheaper than to have all those vast facilities. It's just a cultural thing that we have to overcome. Our cultural inertia, thinks we have to look at each other and make sure that each other's working. Once we overcome that cultural inertia, which I say is so 20th century, then we can really move into the 21st century and expand and accomplish great things. I do also think that there's opportunities that people can look at. Maybe we're not dining out so much. Maybe we have other distribution problems where people can look for new ways to make a living on their own. I advocate growing worms, growing gardens, but also, so I've started a whole new video series based on this entire press stuff, and I'm calling it Quarantine Living. And I've done a couple episodes already, and I will do more. And one of them I actually did, I called for people to start a courier service, because I realized there's guys like you, Paul, living in an apartment way up on the 12th floor in New York City, and it's probably not necessarily the best place to start a garden. Although there is a guy I know in Baltimore who grows microgreens out of a spare bedroom in a second-story apartment, and he sells them and makes $100,000 a year within his zip code in Baltimore. So it's doable, but you're a few more floors. It might be a little harder. You do have an elevator, but still. But courier service, you can do a courier service, Paul. I mean, hey, you might only need a bicycle, but even a vehicle from what you can make would probably be worth the investment if you can afford it. But if not, just whatever you got. A bicycle and a backpack might work at some level, at some dimension. So I go into some great detail in that video about how to establish a courier service. And I was thinking about guys like you, Paul, when I did that. So because I realized there's a lot of guys and gals in places like where you're at that can't do some of the things that I do and some of the other things I advocate. So I gave y'all some time and consideration. I'll do it some more, but I think we really got to rethink how we live and how we go about it. And that's why I started that video series I call Quarantine Living. So I do think this is permanent. What do you think about my?
Well, I think it's a good idea, but it depends on, everyone's in a different state of mind right now. And what I'm going to say is pretty deep, okay? But I agree with you that there's opportunities that at this moment and after the pandemic ends, which it will end, there's going to be a new landscape of opportunities. There are, through evolution, it creates niches. But when a black swan event happens, some of those unique micro niches die off and new ones arise that allow for new opportunities. And that's what we're seeing here, there's a new micro niching that's going to take place. So I agree with you on this, but the
enterprise is that you have the freedom to enterprise, come up with and find these solutions. Basically, all you do is you say what's needed, what's required, what do people need, what do they want that they're not getting, what can I provide? When you find an intersection, bam.
But I wanted to make the caveat here. The nation has this pandemic differently. Our nation, the United States, is different regions, different states are affected differently.
Right.
I'm in an area that's pretty intense.
Yeah,
and I'll tell you, and I'll tell you where I'm at right now psychologically. All right.
Let's hear it.
It's getting harder and harder to really be scientific and not emotional. It's the shelter in place, the stress, the realization that these numbers are getting larger. They're building tents out in the street for morgues. This is creating a certain level of anxiety that is not healthy, and it's not acute. It's becoming chronic. All right, and as we continue, and we're going to hear probably at the end of this weekend something about forced quarantining in New York City, where no one, it's going to be much more, government controlled than what we have right now. And most people in New York City are following the shelter in place guidelines, but the ones that aren't are, going to institute the government coming in maybe with armed, soldiers forcing the issue. So that adds to another level of anxiety. So it's, to be totally honest, Craig, it's getting harder and harder to really think about microgreens. It's getting harder and harder to think about, business opportunities or some of these niche things.
You got to make
Because I'll tell you, I'm, here's the problem that's starting to creep up for me.
panic. You're talking.
Yeah, I'm starting to see, that.
Well, if you fall to panic, how bad it is. If you fall to panic, you lose.
Well, I mean, I'm looking at the numbers and I'm like going, there's a 50% chance that I get COVID-19.
Yeah, but what's panic going to accomplish for you? All you can do is take discrete measures. I mean, think about it. If you know you're going to be in a fight, to panic over it is not going to help you. What's going to help you is to be rational. And the best fighters, the martial arts teach you, is to try to be rational in an adverse.
No, I get that. I get that. So
that-
there's the,
All the
so
hormones want you to go in fight or flight. So you got to find some way to keep from triggering that fight or flight syndrome. Once you're into it, you're not thinking straight. You're going to make mistakes and you're going to hurt yourself or someone else if you're not careful, because it's hard to think straight when you're in fight or flight. Now, I know the advice I'm giving is hard, and people, Greg, what are you talking about? You don't know what yeah, I've been there actually in other situations where I've had to be calm when I was about, when I had a group of guys about to jump me on one occasion, a few other places, and that saved me, my ability to think, because I didn't go into panic mode. If I'd have went in panic mode, I'd have been pummeled to a pile of beef. So I have been there, and that has, on those occasions, I'm not going to say I wouldn't go into flight or fight. I wouldn't go into panic mode, but if you can avoid that, then you are ahead. And yeah, you're under a lot of stress, and that makes it worse. And I can't really preach to you and tell you what to do. I'm just trying to give you a little advice to not panic.
It's starting to get to the point, by talking, and I've been talking about this since January. I prepared, but those preparations are starting to wear down. And when you now do 100% lockdown, it's going to be hard to fulfill, restock. Right. And, some of these things that are starting to creep up.
That's why I talked about it.
It's causing, well, I mean, I just, I would be lying to people if I said I'm not scared. I am scared.
I believe you. I believe you.
It's, I hope I'm wrong. I hope that, Neil Ferguson's right, because my life would be a lot better, a lot quicker. Right. But I don't think he's right. and the government seems to be instituting policies and procedures that is, that may be instituting a much longer lockdown. We thought, well, maybe around 2 weeks, in 2 weeks, a week or 2 weeks would be, out of the shelter in place by now. I'm thinking it's going to be all of April, not until the beginning of May before I see, before we're out of this shelter in place. And like, for example, all the medical schools in the United States are now teleteaching, all of them, all right. So I already received, because I've been accepted to medical school. I was supposed to start this year. And the plan is still to start this year, but the first semester is going to be planned to be teletaught, because they don't think that the schools are planning that we're not going to be out of this anytime soon.
That's smart.
Now we might be lucky, and they say, well, it's all, it passed, we're okay, and we go, to on site and start learning, like, the brick and mortar the way we used to. But schools are not planning for that. They are planning for a worst case scenario, and that is the students aren't coming back in the fall. So what do they know? That Ferguson doesn't know. So I just so you have to look at how are different organizations, the school system, the government, other organizations, how are they planning? What are their actions? And the actions I'm seeing are, they're predicting this to be much longer duration than what some individuals are stating. This is not the flu. You wouldn't be shutting down the economy like this for the flu.
No, let me go back to share my spreadsheet again because that really plays into it. So did I? Yeah, I got it shared. Okay, good. You see the spreadsheet now, Carl? So,
Hmm.
uh, no, it's not the flu. And if you follow these numbers and the doublings I showed, this would have you burning out in April, the end of April, like some of them were thinking. But there's other factors that will come into play. There's other resistive factors and some of the shelter in place, and that I think will slow that down. The warmer weather may slow it down. So I'm kind of expecting it's really going to come back in the fall and winter and bite us hard then. That's just my gut feeling on it. I mean, if I looked at the numbers, I'd say, oh, it's going to just burn out in April. But I just think there's other factors that play into it.
Well, my gut feeling was this, that we were going to see a decline of the first incident, the primary incident, in May, and that it was going to come back up again in late October.
Yeah,
That the secondary is picking up in late October.
I can see that, but and then you've already got a lot of cases that's out there, so it's spread wider a lot faster because it's already out in the community everywhere. Just kind of like in the southern hemisphere, there's cases all over the place. It's been summer.
But can you imagine in New York? Okay, we're sheltered in place until the end of April. Okay, and then all of a sudden we're locked down again for another 40 days in October through November.
Psychologically going to be
I mean, it's just like it's psychologically devastating, and it's economically devastating.
oh yeah, that too. New York's the financial capital of the world. Of course, I think it's
I just
40% of our finance, 40% of our economy is banking. That's kind of moving money around is, to me, is not exactly a productive way to add to the GDP, but that's just me. So if you look at so, yeah, so we tend to bail out the banksters. They get all the goodies first in this country. Looking back what happened in 2008. All that aside, so I'm not a big fan of the banksters and the money funders, if you will. So if you look at, this are my projections that I talked about. We didn't go into that in this sheet. That if you look at the United States, our population, the reported cases when we started this broadcast, the reported deaths, and if you just divide them, you can see my formula up here where I'm dividing G10 by F10. Then that would suggest that we've got, and these are not accurate numbers because, we have cases that haven't played out. There's cases that haven't been tested. So, but this is kind of a rough indicator. That's all it is. And it suggests a CFR of 1.67 for us. For Italy, we're looking at 10.8, almost 11. That's just, wow, crazy. China, I think their numbers are lies, but even China's numbers suggest a 4.05. So, maybe we will rise up to a 4 or worse, but I don't know. So, all that aside, that part's the conjecture part. What's not conjecture is to ask, well, how far will this penetrate the population? I did this infection rate number here based on a couple cycles back, how many people were actually infected in Italy compared to the total population. So I thought, well, that's a good possible rate that we could get penetration because that was what already tested positive in that population. And it was still early on the curve. So I thought this was not a bad way to look at an early what if. And if you take that number and put it against the US, and if that's our infection rate, we'd expect a total number of infections of 404,000 people. I'm going to show you why I actually think we're beyond that right now, probably. And so I think we've already blown past this, basically, because I'll show you in a minute. I'll come back to it. But I also look, what happens if 25% gets infected? What happens if 50% gets infected? And what happens if you get to what's known as the herd immunity level of 75%? And some people have said that they expect that 80% of the people will be infected. And if you got all these extra pathways that you talked about, that could happen. Pareto's law is it takes 20% of the work to get the 80% mark, but 80% of the work to finish the job and do the other 20%. So 80% seems to be kind of a natural where things go, 75 to 80%. So I could definitely see the numbers getting to here. So if we have a case fatality rate of 1, which is lower than these numbers over here, and it may in fact be this low because we have the untested cases. So if it gets to a case fatality rate of 1, then you're looking at 2.5 million people. Even here at 2.6. So either way, it's somewhere around 2.5 million people in the United States that could die. Well, 2 is a doubling of that, right? So you're looking at somewhere around 5. If it's 4, you're looking at somewhere around 10 million Americans dead when it's all over with. If it gets up to 10, like in Italy, then this is the 5 number over here. If it gets up to 10, like in Italy, you're talking 250,000 people in the United States dead. I mean, no, not 250,000. You're talking about 25 million people. 25 million people.
See, my calculations are in between your, 2.5 to 4% CFR.
So you're right in this area.
So I was saying 6.9 million.
That's reasonable. That's right in the middle of my charts here. That's a very reasonable projection. I don't know where this is actually going to play out, but that's a reasonable projection. But so many people are going, well, this is only old people, so why am I worried about it? Well, here's what people need to know. There is half the people in these hospitals and ICUs are under 50. A lot of younger people have been affected. Usually they're affected with serious illnesses instead of fatalities.
Exactly. It's not just old people. It's people that have other comorbidities. People need to realize that there are an awful lot of individuals sick.
That's for dying. What I want to say is that your chances of having a serious illness and then permanent disability following it are very significant. Because if you take some of the numbers I'm hearing, about 20%. So if you take 20% of the population and look at this penetration, this many people get sick, or this many people get sick, or this many people get, and then you take 20% of them, this is what you're looking at. You're looking at something on the order of 50 million people or more, somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 million.
I was saying ICU cases was 27 to 28 million.
Well, that's right along here.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's, so, but that in the country over a 20-month period, that's another thing that we got to think about is that it's the primary, secondary, 18 to 20 months. So that was, what I was looking at. The
question is, what's going to be the time intervals between here? Right now, we're running fast time intervals. Is it going to slow down? Will it stop for a while and pick up? I don't know the answer to that. I didn't put a time on here. I just showed doublings. That's why I didn't put a time on here, because I think time will be variable. But
because you're going to, in that primary wave, you're going to have that exponential increase, then an exponential fall, then there's going to be some lag, a dormancy, and then all of a sudden the secondary wave, and you'll have an exponential incline, an exponential fall. So this thing's going to hit us in waves.
So I did a ratio and proportion for those that know mathematics. I put X over the population of China, and then I put X over the population of Italy. And, well, not X, I used the number of deaths in Italy. And it might have been, actually, I think I used it, yeah. And then I solved for how many people should China actually have dead by that, or how many would you expect them to have dead? No, I haven't.
And that's assuming that they have the same susceptibility with the receptors and the same comorbidities.
See what's in
See what I mean? It's a lot more complicated.
So
to model.
Was G22 by E22 and multiplied by E16. So I can come back up here in the cells and see exactly what I used. And so G22 is that's the reported deaths in Italy, and E22 then would be the reported deaths in China. Let's see. E22 is Chinese population. Okay, so I use total populations. Okay, that's what I saw for. Yeah, so the death rate, well, that was the one that wasn't the X. So then you've got times, it should be the Chinese population, E16, and it's exactly, okay. So I used the total population, and it's not the reported cases. That's what I thought.
And that, and that also, doesn't model in, a white swan where it could be that chloroquine works and it brings down the numbers better. It's just, it's really, it's very, to model these things it's difficult, you know. So there has to be a lot of reductionist methods that, it could either be overshooting or undershooting, depending.
So this shows,
But I'm just, I just a rough cut. I think that you're pretty close based on what I was,
that's Italy's
thinking.
infection rate. So that's what it is now. It's higher than what I used above. It's gone up. So I used the earlier rate. So it's gone up since then because this is the cells. I just put a value in up here when I was putting in this number. So I could take this number and put it over here now, and that would probably be more reflective. Now, well, based on that China's deaths, you would expect to see about 250,000 people dead in China, and they're reporting 3,000.
Right.
Yeah, they're way off.
And
Whatever it is, they're way off. I mean, you hear reports of mortals run in and of all these urns still coming out of Wuhan. I mean, like right now, there's still reports of them trucking out, 2,500 urns at a time. Was this every week? I don't know, but they're having.
that's why I think that there are about 8 that when everything's said and done, it wouldn't surprise me that China, is in the hundreds of millions in terms of confirmed cases, if they tested correctly, if they're publishing what they're testing.
Published.
I mean, with I think their population is 1.4 billion, maybe it's 1.2 billion. But either way, if you get just half the population that's infected, and they have, large population densities, much larger than ours.
435 billion.
How much?
1.4.
1.4. Yeah. Okay. So all right. So 1.4. So you should be getting 700 million individuals infected with COVID-19. The far majority are going to be, in absolute numbers, the far majority will be mild cases. But even with that large number, you're going to have a lot of ICUs, and with that large number, you're going to have a lot of deaths.
Yeah, well, I got China on that spreadsheet.
I mean, their cases are going to their number in terms of total confirmed cases are going to be 4 times larger, a little less than 4 times larger than what will be in the United States.
Yeah, if you look at the
like 3.5 times larger.
Look, you could have, like you said, you could go anywhere from 53 to 114 million dead in China. I mean, millions. Over 100, you could have over 100 million dead in China when it's all said and done, if this thing is spreading the same way. There's a lot of assumptions being made, but this is just looking at case fatality, varying case fatality rate against population. That's all I'm doing here for each country. And you could populate this on down with any country you wanted to, just copying these cells and looking at the populations of these different countries. I could just go on down here and put just any number of countries in this sheet. That's just what I've got in here right now, because those are some of the tall poles in the tent. Now, I'm sure people from other countries will like to see other things. This is easily done. This spreadsheet was easy to set up, but I set it because nobody was talking about it this way. It's funny, the day after I published my video, Chris Martinson showed a chart with a column like this.
So, I swear there are other channels that, look at, channels like mine or yours, and they're taking bits and pieces of it and repackaging. I see it on what's going on War Room with Steve Bannon on his show.
Oh, yeah.
So, but as long as it helps, as long as the word is getting out and people are safer through the knowledge, I don't care. I don't care.
The whole purpose is to get people aware. I mean, if people aren't aware, they're not going to prepare. And we got so many people in denial right now. That's the only reason. I've got people getting, Greg, why don't you move on, because they ought to know by now. If they don't know by now, to heck with them. Well, if they don't know and they're not preparing, then they're going to be out spreading this stuff. If they're spreading this stuff, then they're out infecting other people and God knows what. So, it's a moral responsibility. These people ought to take care of themselves. And I feel like when you know something, with great knowledge comes great responsibility. If you know something, you have the responsibility to share it. And that's what you and I.
And right, exactly. We're trying to smash the curve in our own way, right?
Bingo. And we got to smash the curve so we don't overwhelm the hospitals, because in the end, the fatality rate, that case fatality rate, is going to go higher if the hospitals are overwhelmed, if the medical staff can't see the people, if they don't have the equipment, the ventilators, and that kind of stuff. So let's talk a little bit more about China. We kind of tipped on. I don't want to talk about what to do. We were going really long here in this video. I don't want to go too much longer, but this whole thing with China, the things you're suggesting, if true, uh, I've done a couple of videos, 2 or 3 videos talking about China, talking about how they have a very aggressive policy, how it's actually been stated and written up for taking more and more control of the economy of the world. You got guys like there's a Dr. Allison down in what university is he with? He's at Cambridge. No. Where is he at? I forget right off the top of my head. Graham Allison. He talks about this quite a bit in a lot of his talks. And actually, he tells out China's plans, as they were stated, for how they intend for their economy and their country and their military to progress over the next several years. They've got a plan laid out. There's a plan laid out talking about the kind of stuff we're dealing with right now. Some of the Chinese generals have written up. There are a lot, and then if you look at what China's doing, how they're moving the chess pieces on the board. This thing in the South China Sea is a very military aggressive policy of setting up those islands and territories far beyond what should rightfully be theirs, infringing on the territories of what should be other nations in the South China Sea. These other countries are kind of scared, and because of the 900-pound gorilla in the room, and some of them, like the Philippines, have switched from the United States to an alliance with China because they figure they better get on the side with who they think is going to win. But they're still going to be overrun. They don't understand. And China's cutting deals with the Pacific Islands all over the Pacific right now, going in and offering bags of money for exclusive rights to airports and harbors. And they go and promise all this infrastructure, but it's still Chinese infrastructure. It's built by Chinese. The islanders really aren't getting much out of it. And in the end, they're going to find themselves under occupation and probably pushed off their island.
Well, no. What also is happening is that they're loaning money to the governments, and what happens is they know that they can't pay it back. So what happens? They go into default, and they gain property. They gain property or resources from those islands or those countries. This is happening in Africa. So they are doing a imperial move right now.
All the money they've loaned us, how do they collect on that? Do they claim America? Do they say, hey, you owe us? So
well, I mean, the thing is when you have a bond, when you buy bonds, you usually hold them to maturity. So a lot of these bonds are 30-year bonds or 10-year bonds, and they get a coupon payment. So the government pays a coupon payment on each of those bonds. If they try to sell them, it will, lower they have so many of them, they can't dump them all. So if they try to dump them all, the whatever is left, on their balance sheet, would be worthless. But then they would dislocate our bond market. The Federal Reserve would come in and it would just print money. So, I mean, here's the facts that a lot of people don't realize. The largest owner of bonds is the American public. It's not China.
That's true.
Right? A lot of people don't get that. So yes, China is a big country that owns a lot of our bonds.
A lot of them are all.
But Japan owns a lot, and so does Saudi Arabia. Right. So it's not. But the American public owns it quite a bit too. We own our own debt. And if you look at who's the largest debt holder of the United States, it's the American public.
Yeah. So when you look at all this, Paul, you're thinking something's going to happen in 2015. I mean, the chess pieces are
2025.
I just repeated your.
Yeah.
You said that and it stuck in my head. Yeah, I corrected you now. You corrected me. So how it goes right goes right. Mm-hmm. So 2025. Why do you think 2025?
Because it was stated in the PLA plan. They stated that they were going to control the island chains by 2025.
Yeah, they're on track.
This was President Xi has stated that.
Yeah, they're on track.
Unequivocally, that they want the island chains, and not only that, they want all of the chains. There's a secondary. There's a primary and a secondary island chain. They want to control all of them by 2045. The first line is supposed to be secured by 2025. That's why I think by 2025 we're going to have a naval battle.
Well, they're already talking about EMP in American ships in the South China Sea. So this is real. The tensions are ratcheting up. The whole idea, we built China up by selling cheap crap through Walmart, basically.
Mhm.
China, that's how the Chinese economy grew, was that Walmart cut a lot of deals with them. We sold a lot of cheap crap, and they used that to build their military. And you got to remember that most of the companies in China are owned by their military, and as is the CCP, the Communist Chinese Party. They and the military are one and the same. So and they don't have the differences that we have in America. So you can't really just talk about a Chinese Department of Defense. It's all the same thing. And so when you buy that little rubber ducky from China, you're paying for bullets over there. And by the way, if we're going to buy bullets, we probably got to borrow money from China to buy a bullet from China to shoot at China. We don't seem to produce anything anymore. America won all its wars by outproducing their opponents. We won wars through sheer attrition. That's how America's won all its wars, by sheer attrition. And so if you're not the biggest producer and you're taking on the world's biggest producer, you could be in a pickle. You better really think that through and be incredibly smart. The Chinese play by the rules of Sun Tzu. And rules of Sun Tzu tell you things like, you get your enemy to relax. You tell them everything's fine and wonderful. Sit down, relax. Can I get you a drink? Here's a book. And when you pick up the book and you're sipping the drink, they stab you in the back. Asymmetric warfare would be their favorite way to do things. And something like what we're seeing now would be maybe they did not intend to release it now. Maybe it got accidentally released. Maybe this was intended for 2025.
Well, it could very well be that this weapons program was to be released in 2025 as a last resort, or as part of their arsenal.
Now, though, but now that it's out and about, they may advance their plans. Now, here's what I'm gonna lay on you.
Well, here's the one thing that's weird. We may have released it. We may have had a mole in the P4 lab to weaken the CCP. I mean, that was one thought that I had a long time ago.
Yeah,
I've
heard that. You said it on my channel, actually. So what about this? What happens now? What do they do next? What's the next shoe to drop? What happens if we're down real hard this fall? If you're an enemy and you got an opponent and you finally got the point where your opponent's down, you kick them when they're down. That's what you do.
I think they're going to move on. I think you're going to see some sort of military movement on the island chains. You're going to see some sort of confrontation, minor, but some confrontation in the Pacific between China and the United States.
What about if you're going to hit America? I think most opponents know what George Washington knew about the Hessians when he crossed the Delaware into Pennsylvania in 1776 on the night of the 25th and the morning of the 26th, and attacked. That the best time to attack is Christmas. And in the United States, most of our troops are home. That's when we're the most down. I would anticipate that if we're really down this year, we might get hit. There's a possibility. If you want to hit us and hit us here, the best way to do it would be an EMP. And if you wanted to launch an EMP attack on us, you'd want to make it look like somebody else did it. Do you believe in prophecy?
I'm Jewish, so I haven't really focused on the New Testament at all. But in the Old Testament, there are prophets that predict certain events, and they seem to have come true. Even the story of Exodus was a prophecy, because the Jews were told that they would be in Egypt, they would go through hardship, and then there would be a exodus out, and it would be a person that comes from water. So when Moses, Moshe is the water, right. So there was a prophetic, so there was a kind of a prophecy kind of passed down to state that. And when Moses reveals himself to the Jewish people and says the things that he says, they realize that that this was the beginning of the prophetic story of the Exodus. So yeah, I mean, I do believe in prophecy, pertaining to the Old Testament. I don't know anything about prophecy dealing with the New Testament.
This is not really a New Testament prophecy. I've had a contact that's been telling me, now she's a female who lives on a farm in Wisconsin. And I'm
Mhm.
gonna have her on my channel, and she can talk this in the future. But she has had prophetic dreams recurrently, and her kids, her husband, they're all having these, and they're all intertwined. And a lot of these things they've seen has seemingly come true.
Mhm.
But what strikes me interesting is that she's had this dream, this vision of the United States getting attacked, and that she didn't understand it. She saw missiles exploding warheads in space above the United States, and she didn't get what that meant because she saw my channel and saw the stuff about an EMP.
Mhm. Mhm.
She's had these visions. But what really strikes me interesting is what she envisioned was missiles coming exactly the way I thought an attack would progress. If somebody wants to hit us, they want to be able to conceal it. So you want to have a launch location that could be, you could point to this one or that, and nobody could tell you exactly who did it. The perfect place to do this from is exactly what she saw, and how some farm girl from, she's a nice, smart girl, but that she would see this and see it in this detail, to me, makes it interesting. I'm not saying this is going to happen. And I would also say that if you take the story of Job, that prophecies can be a warning that you can change the course of. And I definitely believe in a multidimensional universe. I believe that we can, through prayer and meditation, change what pathway we're on. And then again, maybe she's just having a wild dream, or a vision. I totally entertain that. So
There,
don't.
in the Judaic perspective here, if the visions are repeated, it's something that you have to pay attention to very closely,
She's had
very closely.
she's had these repeated, and it's,
Yeah, and that's the key. It's
not the
repeated.
only member of her family that's had these. But the thing that catches my interest is it's exactly how you would do this. It is it is the perfect strategy. The tactics are spot on. She envisioned the launches taking, and it made no sense to her. Why would she envisioned these launches taking place off the coast of Venezuela? Well, Venezuela don't have anything, but Venezuela has Russians operating down there, the Chinese are operating down there, and the North Koreans had their ship called the Gang in the Gulf of Mexico and probably the Caribbean Sea back a few years ago with two
Well,
great missile launchers.
I mean, how much infiltration has the Chinese made with South America?
Quite a bit, quite a bit. And,
Really?
and
Oh,
Russia's in Venezuela too. So that's what makes it who done it, because North Korea has had their fingers down there. Uh, China's had their fingers down there. Russia's got their fingers down, and
well,
Iran pull this off.
right. I mean, this is why we have to strengthen the grid. I mean, the grid is a huge national security issue.
This is
Huge.
I've been talking that. I've been beating on that hammer hard for several years now, and a lot of people just aren't seeing it. They aren't buying it. The industry is resistant. They're fighting because it means they got to do something. They don't want to do anything. So I think we're really at risk, and this may not happen. And the vision may be totally invalid, but the method makes sense. And the fact that she saw it this way, in fact, it would be, if I were a planner on the other side and trying to figure out how to, this is exactly the way I would have done it, because this is what I was already thinking. And she starts telling me this, I'm going, oh my God, where did you come up with that? Because this, I've talked about this stuff on my channel, but I didn't never lay that out in that manner. And it's like, wow, holy smoke. Well, any opponents doing the same thought exercise I've been having, and this is exactly what, how I would have went about it. Is some method like that. You can take a smaller launcher and go off the deck of a ship. I've launched from ships myself, balloons and rockets, 20 years ago. I know how to do this. I could do that kind of operation, for Pete's sake. I don't have a nuke though, but I could do all the rest of it because I've done it 20 years ago. Holy smoke. You get a
I don't
Navy.
think it would be Russia though. I think it's China. I
I,
see it as China.
That's what I would suspect. Now Iran could do it, and I've got other reasons to think that Iran has a
Yeah,
couple.
but I don't think Iran has the naval capability of launching from the ocean
All you need is a supply.
like that.
Paul, you don't need a navy. I could do it with a supply boat, like you run out and to the oil rigs from a balloon. You could put a missile launcher like the Chong.
That's a good point. That's a good point. See, I'm thinking like, you know, an attack sub.
No, you wouldn't even use. You could. You absolutely could use an attack sub, and it exists, but you could do it from a freighter or a supply boat. You don't require that. In fact, that may be the best cover. You don't see a military ship anywhere. You go, what happened?
And you blame it on the Middle East because, you know, let's say it was, you know, that it's right. Exactly.
They did it. So who do we attack? And who are we to attack him at? So we're down from the flu. We're sick as all get out. It's Christmas. So what few people can are home, and the lights go out. Our command and control is sophisticately compromised, and our nation's done. If that happens, we're finished. I mean, that would be kicking us when we're down and kicking us to the ground. That would be game over. I sincerely hope this is not true. I sincerely.
Well, did she say what year she thought it was going to happen?
Yeah, she thought this December.
This December? I can't take this anymore. I mean, you know, because I mean, Wuhan's hard enough. The economy's hard enough, but then you have a major grid down. I mean, it's like.
All right, so a lot of people are going to say this is fear porn. Look, guys, I'm not saying this is going to happen, but it could.
Right, no, but you know, you know, but I just that the American public just couldn't take it.
But well, that's why they would want it. They don't want you to take it, but they'll give it to you anyway.
No, but the thing is that you know, they couldn't take it, and it would create so much anger that it wouldn't be like a Middle Eastern conflict. You're talking about World War. I mean, like.
So if you were to be the if you were to do this, if you were the perpetrator, you wouldn't do anything else. You'd just back off and wait for a year. You wouldn't attack. You wouldn't do anything else to the country. You would apologize. You'd offer aid and help. You wouldn't do anything bad. You would, oh my God, that's horrible. You'd blame it on the other.
Well, you would have people in the Pentagon that would think that it was Iran. You'd have some that would think it's Russia, and you'd have some that think it's China.
Bingo, exactly. Maybe North Korea. But if you did,
maybe
if you did this, who knows? Maybe it'd be a inside job. But if you did something like that, if you pull something off like that.
See, I was thinking that the war would happen right after Trump's out of office. That's what I was thinking, not during his administration.
I don't know.
Because I think that he you know, that I think he would give total war. You know, a person like Obama, no. But a person like Trump, that's total war.
Trump would try, but who does he know who to hit? How does he know where to hit at?
Well, I think he's just knee jerks to China anyways.
Maybe.
That's the reason why I don't think they would do it under Trump, because he would just say it's China. I'm hitting them. He's gonna just take it as face value and just make it's China.
How many James Bond plots was the evil guy was trying to get the Russia and China, the Russia and the United States to fight each other, to wipe each other out so they could take over the world? Maybe Russia.
Maybe I don't know. But there would be some big infighting in the Pentagon, you know, dealing with, you know, maybe it's because there's a big push to hit Iran.
Oh yeah,
way more than hit China. So
9/11, what did we do? We hit two countries. After 9/11, we hit Iraq.
But the thing is, if they do that with this virus, and we already have, you know, part of the public is, you know, awake that it's from China, you know, and they're already knee jerk to China. If they knocked our grid out, I think I'm positive that Trump would move towards China as the perpetrator.
He'd probably hit China and Iran, just hit them both.
It could be. I don't know. You know, in that case where our grid's down, we're going to be using nuclear weapons. Yeah, I mean, whoever we attack will be nuked.
Well, whatever the case, us here, we're going to be in a pickle. Whether we nuke somebody or not isn't going to help us right here at all. because they project 9 out of 10 would be dead within a year. And I would say those were produced, those projections by the Congressional MP task force about 12 years ago. They were at the time not considering that most farmers don't grow their own food, that the seeds they have are not replantable, that of course they're not going to be able to operate in the first place. They weren't considering that the nuclear power plants, they weren't even looking at the spent fuel rods at that time, and the fact that they're going to go into meltdown and spew all kind of radiation that's going to really affect a lot of areas in the country really badly. So there was a lot of things they didn't factor in. I would say you might have 1 in 20 survive that event after a year. It would be beyond catastrophic. So I'm not saying this is going to happen. I say it's in the possibility space, and people need to be aware. They really need to prepare, and both psychologically and physically preparing. In case an event like this happened, people need to consider making themselves right with their Creator, and maybe some repentance would keep us out of this. That was the message that she had, was that we've got to repent if we don't want this to come true. Now, I'm not saying it's going to come true. I'm just saying it's within the realm of possibility space. Now, the means are there. There's motive for it. Is the motive sufficient to overcome the downside? If you're China and if you're Iran, maybe not, unless you've got some crazy idea in your head. Of course, they're blaming us for this flu. I mean, tensions would have to. But then again, if the Chinese are figuring they want to hit us anyway, if we're going to hit them back, they have done one thing in China. They built a set of cities that are ghost cities that are all upwind from the current cities. If they know they're going to do something with us, they just might move their people back and take the hit on their cities. They already got a place to go to. It's downwind.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So they've already got their chess pieces in place. They could pull this off and survive it.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point.
It's possible. Now, again, I didn't say it's going to happen. I'm just saying that we need to think about it. We need to be prepared, and we need to do whatever we can to make sure that it don't happen, and whatever steps we could do. One thing, we need to make sure this flu don't kick us down that hard so that we're not really down. We need to make sure that we are aware, that our people are prepared, that whatever repentance is and making yourself right with your Creator, the people can do are taken care of. There's plenty of things that we need to do on our side. We need to get our grid hard, big time. That needs to be an immediate priority. But it's going to be an uphill battle to make these things happen. I have instigated political campaigns to try to get some work going in these areas, and I've done good stuff politically with the space development in the past, so I've had some experience in these areas. By the way, I did put up a video or two which I showed the call-in line to Washington, D.C. I know you mentioned some things with a certain bill in a recent video of yours. I cited that, and I gave the switchboard number for Washington, D.C. So I was motivating people to act, and I was giving them I showed them the Congressional bill tracker where they could follow things. So I'm trying to give people the wherewithal to take action other than just telling them to do it.
Well, I did a recent poll on my channel, and only 33% actually contacted their representative about decaching.
And maybe it would help. That's what I was picking on. Maybe it would help if list Congressional bill trackers and just put the Congressional switchboard number. You go look at my last two COVID videos, and you'll find that data there. And I'll try to put it under this channel.
Okay.
Posted. So that might help. That might get your percentage up some. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to help and push this thing a little bit further along, that we get people being responsible to take action to ensure that we have a better outcome and a better future, because I don't think it's a preordained thing that this or that's going to happen. I think that we can take actions to move us in a better space. And a lot of it is that kind of stuff. I also think prayer and meditation are effective for that. And I do have prayer and meditation sessions on my channel. We do those live. So I think there's several things that we can do to put us in a better space, and I'm working it. I'm trying everything I can. So Greg Allison didn't say that that's going to happen. What I said is somebody's seen a vision that indicated to them that this would happen. Now, but that person also had the understanding that we could repent, and it may not happen. So these are things to be taken into consideration. And a lot of people on my channel don't have any faith in anything other than they need to eat and drink water and go to sleep. I don't know, that's it. So that's fine. But they do need to know that just from a militaristic standpoint, all religion and prophecy aside, that some of us have been brainstorming how could these things play out, what would happen. And the scenario she happened to see was a scenario that I was already taking as the most probable mode if they decided to do something like that. And it might be 2025. If we get in a war with them, a direct war, and it progresses, that might be what they would do. In either case, we may have a limited time, whether it's this year or 5 years from now, that our grid may go down if we don't take the correct actions to harden it. If we don't do certain things. So if we don't take care of ourselves, the more we take care of ourselves, the better we'll be off. I do promote the idea that we form tribes that will be resilient, that could survive and get through all these things. That's a big part of what I do on my channel. All right, so all that aside, let's talk about what to do about the COVID-19. How do we deal with it? There's all that you talked about chloroquine several times. And I've looked up chloroquine, and it says it's not advisable to use it in people over 65. And most of the fatality case rates are for people over 70. So apparently it has complications with certain morbidities, to include complications with the lungs. And I saw several side effects of using the chloroquine. So it don't really look like a magic bullet. So what do you think about chloroquine?
It's not a magic bullet, and I've been stating that whatever research that people were citing was very limited, and that more studies have to be conducted, because it's certain cohorts of patients it might work really well for, but other cohorts it won't work well for, and that was the reason why that they were trying the clinical trials with remdesivir. And we just don't know what's happening with remdesivir right now. So we have the clinical trials with remdesivir. We have trials that are happening with the hydroxychloroquine. But people got to understand that there is a serious side effects. One side effects is intestinal side effects.
Intestinal, retina,
Mm-hmm.
heart
Mm-hmm.
issues.
Right.
It's got quite a few. It's quite
Mm-hmm.
quite a few potential severe side effects.
Right. So it's not a magic bullet, for sure. It's not a magic bullet.
I have seen websites and channels come out and say, well, I think there's been a national leader say, okay, it's over, we got it solved. I've actually seen this. Really? Wow.
No. What's going to happen is that as we learn more about the disease and how it affects different people, different ethnicities, different age groups, cocktail. Different disease. There might be a cocktail, but what will happen is that a certain group will get this, a certain group will get this, a certain group will get this. It's not going to be a cookie cutter solution, not at all. And as this gains function with other receptors or more affinity, the treatments are going to be, will be a moving target.
Hmm. Well, I hope people are awake to that and open to it as it evolves, and not just focusing over here like some people just focus on 14 days. Well, if you shut everybody down for 14 days, you're good, or you quarantine 14 days, you're good. I mean, that's just like an absolute. You hear coming out of the CDC and so many other places. But really, no. Anybody that understands mathematics knows what a bell curve is and knows what it means to be so many sigmas out on that bell curve. Anybody that understands mathematics understands exponential progressions like I depicted here. But it appears that a lot of so-called scientists and doctors and epidemiologists don't know math. And a lot of our nation leaders definitely don't know math. So they've got to make policy decisions based on people with things that will mathematically progress based on the ignorance in mathematics. So that scares me. So, all right, what else can we do? I hear talk about we need to increase our alkalinity in our body. Does that really help? I mean, I hear this stuff so much. I'm not a medical doctor, so I don't really know if it's true that getting your alkalinity up will help you.
Well, this comes from a anecdotal story from a family that treated patients from the Spanish flu of 1918, and they were taking baking soda every morning. So that's where this is coming from, I think. So I don't know. I don't think so, but I don't think so. But the thing is that that there are different. You've heard of colloidal silver, right? And you've heard of nano silver, and there's something called alkaline structured silver. So for people that don't know all this stuff, so colloidal silver is like ionized silver. Okay, you have ions of silver in solution. Okay, in an aqueous solution is what we call it. So that's colloidal. All right, there is a toxicity to it if you take it every day. All right, but it does help in terms of fighting pathogens. All right, and this has been around for hundreds of years. So some people take it every day. For a small percentage of people, it can build up in your adipose tissue and under your fingernails beds and cause the blue man syndrome. All right, or the Smurf. You turn into a Smurf, and it can be toxic. That's colloidal. All right, and that's very old technology. Well, about, I don't know, more than 15 years ago or so, nano silver came out, and that isn't ionized. It's not. All right, what it is it's small nanoparticles of a tetrahedral molecule, which is silver and 4 oxygens. And this causes a certain resonance structure where it can steal electrons. Okay, and because it's a tetrahedral molecule, it can attack in multiple ways. When you only have one ion floating around in an aqueous solution, you can only attack once. So this is the power of a nano product. Plus, because it is it's a tetrahedral molecule, it doesn't bind to the adipose tissue. It doesn't come into the adipose tissue and deposit. So you don't have a toxicity buildup. So what happens is it just gets excreted out of your urine after about 12 to 24 hours.
Oh, really?
So so as it's attacking pathogens, but it's also known to help with immune system buildup. Because if your system is always infected, your immune system is always inflamed, and you're not healthy. But if your immune system, if you don't have infection, you're not always in a pro-inflammatory state, so your immune system is better to be able to attack. Yeah, well, that's anti-inflammatory.
Yeah, it helps.
Right. So nano silver is this tetrahedral molecule, but in the liquid form, it is about 4.6 for pH, so it's acidic. The structured silver is also a tetrahedral molecule, same molecule, but these nanoparticles are suspended in an alkaline solution, so its pH is higher. So in terms of ability to fight certain types of pathogens, it's roughly the same, acidic or alkaline. But if you're swallowing this stuff and you're taking it every day, people may have more upset stomachs with a acidic version, which is the nano silver, versus the structured alkaline silver. That's the only thing that I can see that's different. And it may be less disruptive in the intestinal tract, because when you have fluids coming from the stomach into the duodenum, it has to go from a very acidic, a very low pH, to a much higher pH. And the pancreas and the liver and the gallbladder start secreting biles and bicarbonate and other enzymes that bring up the pH, make it more alkaline, as that fluid is being pumped out of the stomach and into the duodenum. So if it's more alkaline, and you're taking it every day, that passage through between the stomach and the duodenum there's less of a shock to the system. If you have a more acidic stomach, it's going to be more of a shock to the duodenum and more of a load on the pancreas and then the liver and the gallbladder. So I think that's part of the reason why that maybe an alkaline solution that's using this tetrahedral molecule is probably better versus the acidic versions. But in terms of uh, alkaline fighting COVID-19. I think there's a case. I mean, I think there's cases, in vitro where if you gave, a low pH solution versus a very high pH solution, you probably have death of the pathogen. So I don't think, disrupting the pH level is known to affect pathogens. But it's not always just make it acidic or always make it alkaline. I think it's the change in pH that is really the main driver, not either direction. You follow me? So but I think with people saying, oh, you want a more alkaline stomach, well, it causes other problems because you need acidic stomach to digest food. So, I don't know. I mean, if people were using nano silver products, I think it's probably better. If they're using it every day, just for immune support, I would suggest the alkaline product versus the acidic product. Now, if you're using it because you're sick, I don't think it really matters, because you're not going to be sick for months and months and months and months. Hopefully not.
I've got some Cottrell silver that I was saving for in case I really got sick. I don't want to mess with it.
Here's the thing with colloidal is that if it's relatively fresh and it's a small bottle, you don't have to worry about it. But if it's a big bottle and it's been sitting around for a while, it can deposit. And if it's, and it being deposited, yeah. So, I mean, for the last about 4 years, I was using Silver Bullet by InfoWars. And it, anytime I had a cold, I would drop it under my tongue, twice. I'd do 2 of those twice a day for 5 days, and I'd stop after 5 days, no matter how sick I was. I would never went beyond 5 days. But the other products, the nano silver products, or structured silver products, the alkaline structured silver products that are out there, you can take those every day because you excrete those within 12 to 24 hours. So you don't have that toxicity, the possibility of toxicity buildup. See, a lot of people, some people are taking this every day, this colloidal silver, and I don't recommend that. Some people say you don't have to worry about it. It's a very small percentage that have the blue man syndrome, whatever it's called. But Ageria or whatever it's called.
I know a woman who's really blue. She says it saved her life, so she doesn't complain about it. But
I don't know. I mean, and she does it every day. She takes it every day.
Or not, but she had a period in her life that she took it and then it turned her blue. So I don't know if she's still taking it. I don't have knowledge of that, but she's definitely blue, very blue. In fact, I mean, her whole skin is tinted. It's kind of interesting. I mean, she really stands out in the crowd.
My understanding is it goes into the adipose tissue, and that's causing the blue effect.
Her skin,
but yeah,
all over.
But yeah.
So that's kind of interesting. So, all right. So what else would you recommend that people take or do? Let's just kind of wrap this up. Let's hit a few things to do. And we've already talked many times ad nauseam about protocols for hygiene and washing your hands and getting your immune system up and all that stuff. So let's just plow a little different ground here. What else would you suggest?
In terms of nutraceuticals?
Well,
or
what do you think the people need to do to treat if they have this, or other ways to prevent it? Besides,
well, I mean, all right.
You know that.
Okay, so right, if you're taking, it's some sort of nutraceutical regimen to boost your immune system. If you're sick, what I have planned for me if I get sick with COVID-19, if I get COVID-19 disease, is it's based on a research paper that's done in vitro, and there's several different compounds that block the protease that helps manufacture this virus. So this protease inhibitor that's in nutraceuticals is in forskolin. So I would take forskolin. I'd take Relora, calendula, birch bark extract, and licorice root. Now I would take those daily, all those daily, if I was sick. I would also take, and it's, all full disclosure, I don't sell those things. But what I do, but what
some links for those, I might just throw them in underneath the video for people to benefit.
they can all, they can all, these products I just mentioned can be all purchased on Amazon. I mean, for any nutraceutical company kind of sells this stuff. It's very common. Forskolin, calendula, Relora, birch bark extract, and licorice root extract. Those are all common things. You want to get the versions where you can put them under the tongue if they're liquid, not topical. I think calendula, there's also a topical version for your skin. You don't want that one. You want the one that you can put under your tongue. Now, I don't sell those, but I recommend it, and that's what I am taking if I get sick. But I also have a store on my website that I've had since March 2nd, all right, that I don't really promote that much, all right, but I do sell silver products, nano silver products, all right. I sell the alkaline version and the acidic version because there's two main companies that make it in the United States, and I deal with both laboratories. All right, so I deal with the one that makes the alkaline version, the high pH version, and the lower pH version. And there's gel versions and liquid versions that are on my website. So I have, obviously because I sell the stuff, I have a lot of it, around me. So taking a liquid or a gel version daily if sick is what I'm doing. Now that's up to you. Do your research, do what you want to do. But from what I have seen and what I've experienced with colloidal silver, I feel that this is probably the best way to attack this particular situation that we're in. If medical care you can't get. Sometimes your doctor won't give you something. We've had cases like this where they only give you pain medication or antibiotics. But what I'm talking about is antiviral.
Right.
So, and you need that. So, if you're sick and you can get to a doctor, try to get the strong stuff. But if you can't, I would recommend this in your medicine cabinet because you don't know. And the thing is that the military, in terms of the nano silver and the structural silver, because they can come in gel form too, the military uses this in the field. All right, so they are using it. So for to fight infection. So if the military is using it, and Homeland Security is trying to procure a lot of liquid silver, nano silver at the 30 ppms, the 30 parts per million level, to sanitize stuff, that tells you something. And these are facts. These are so it's the military uses it, and the government is looking at procuring a awful lot of it. So,
all right, just for the sake of yourself and my viewers, there is I may be doing a video soon. I've got a friend who's involved with a group that are trying to come up with ways to do a DIY ventilator, maybe to make a system that would work through CPAP machines. We're talking engineers and doctors involved in this team, so this is not some fly-by-night thing. I'm really worried that we don't have nearly enough ventilators in this country, and companies are probably not going to roll them out real fast because they got to make sure that their systems got adequate testing, so they know they're not going to blow your lungs up with their machines. So they would rather not send something out and scads of people die than put something out that's going to kill a few, and they get sued out of existence by our litigious happy society. So, thanks to that, we've got to wait. And, hey, at least, hopefully you won't get your lungs blown out by their ventilators when they roll out with them as the epidemic comes to an end. Well, maybe they'll get some out there. I'm being a little pessimistic, so maybe they can get some stuff out there. But we don't have nearly enough ventilators right now. We're talking of a society here where our medical system can get over swamp real fast. If you look at that curve where I was showing in my spreadsheet, where you could have a lot of cases all happening in April, that would be a disaster upon our medical system. Because if you looked over to the other side where I was showing the huge numbers, that would mean all those numbers would be happening in the next few weeks. I don't think that's going to happen. I really hope it don't happen, because if it does, that would be a medical catastrophe, and that would probably march us over to the right side of those charts or the higher CFRs, just because people wouldn't be getting adequate treatment. And there would also be deaths for other persons, because the medical facilities just wouldn't be available to the people that normally need them. And would you want to go there with all these sick people with this illness? So we have a lot of challenges in front of us. And, like I say, some people are going to view this as view porn, fear porn. And I'm just going to say, look, we're just out here calling what we see, and we're doing this. We're taking a lot of time. I've got a lot of other things to do, and this video probably isn't going to get that many watchers because it's so long. But for those who can be informed, I hope we're helping you. I hope that you can see this and realize that you need to take this seriously and take care of your family, your loved ones. There are a lot of things you need to do. There's a lot of other videos me and other people have done for caring for these kind of situations, what you've got to do. This is here just to let you know the gravity of it. Yeah, we did bring up some other things that were outside the scope of just talking COVID, talking China and EMP and things like that. But these things may go hand in hand, maybe, possible, we don't know. But you just need to prepare. You need to be ready. This is why you need to take seriously buying food and growing your own food more than anything else. Because if the grid goes down, I don't mean you're dead automatically. It just means you're living in a much more challenging period. If you have the communities to support you, if you form tribes, if we do the work between now and then you've got a pretty good shot. If you follow the things I'm telling you, learn the things I'm talking about. I do videos on growing your own food. I do videos on eating out of the wild. I'm not scared, because if it happens, I'm just going to go out in the woods and live. As long as I don't get knocked out by some disease or directly by something else, which is, it's always a possibility. But then, it is what it is. So I do try to urge you to keep your heads on your shoulders and not panic. To be as rational as you can. I know that's hard to do, especially when you're sitting and hearing all the things that Paul said. Paul is at ground zero, basically. He's in the city that's got where things are going south faster than any place anywhere. It's just not a comparable place to be by any stretch of the imagination. And he elected to be there. He could have left. He's had offers from many other people say, hey, Paul, come here, come there. He definitely is there because he wants to be on the front line, because he's a patriot and a trooper. And some of you don't see that, but Paul's one of the guys who's anti-globalism. So if you think he's a globalist shill, you're really barking up the wrong tree. That's not the man I'm talking to. Paul Cottrell.
If I was a globalist shill, don't you think I'd be like in the mountains? I'm not. I'm right in right off of Wall Street. But for people that are listening, all the way through this video, so now I'm living on cornbread. So put it in the description. What is Paul living on? And it's cornbread.
Cornbread is good. Hey, we in the South like cornbread, so Paul, you're singing my song. Definitely love our cornbread.
Right.
It's kind of hard to find cornmeal in New York City, but given it's not the natural attribute up there, but cornbread is good. So do this. Normally you say these things in the beginning of a video because you lose most of your viewers, but our discussion was so engaging, I just didn't want to delve into it. But please check my links below my channel, support my channel. You do need to have some long-term food storage. It's getting more challenging to get. It's getting more challenging to get anything. And if you're on a waiting list to get it, this is going to be a long-term situation, so it's probably worthwhile to do it. You can go to prepwithgreg.com for long-term food storage with Patriot Supply. PrepWithGreg.com, link below. You really need to grow heirloom seeds, grow your own garden, and please use my link to True Leaf Market, link below. And I sell worms, www.greengregs.com. You can recycle your own kitchen waste. You don't have to buy fertilizer, and you may not be able to buy fertilizers. So I've been telling you that for a long time. But worms gives you the ability to develop and recycle your kitchen waste to make the best growing medium you can imagine. So, Paul, do you have any closing thoughts? Anything you want to add as we wrap up here and think about eating some cornbread?
Well, I'm hungry. But we're going to go through some dark times, but there at the end of this, there will be some light. So we just got to go get through it. But
so the proposition of my channel is to help people to thrive, survive, and stay out of the hive. And the idea, you got to be able to do it in the best and the worst of times. We may be in for the worst of times. We don't know how fast and furious this may or may not come to us. Some of these things we talked about, this disease might just blow away. It might mutate and become harmless in a matter of days. And that would be our greatest hope. And maybe we can pray and meditate it to do that. And maybe the people in China will see fit to overthrow the CCP, and we'll have a nice, beautiful country and people to deal with over there. So there's wonderful people in China. They're just under the jackboot of the CCP, unfortunately. So, there's always hope. There's always a possibility that things will go a lot better. And we've looked at some of the downsides of what may come at us. So again, this is not fear porn. This is just telling you that you need to keep your eyes wide open and head on a swivel. And we're telling you some of the areas you need to look and be aware of, because these are real possibilities. Will they happen? I'm not saying that. I don't know what's going to happen. But I do know that things are coming at us. I do know that now is the time to prepare. And I think that's pretty darn obvious at this point. And I do know that a lot of times adversaries will kick an enemy when they're down, especially if they can make it look like the other guy did it. So, so we do need to be careful. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I just say we need to be careful. So, and I hope I haven't scared the wits out of people. That's not the intention of this video. I'm not here to try to scare the wits out of you. I'm just trying to open your eyes and make you think and make you ponder and consider what you got to do. Don't panic. Just think. Use your head and get ready. But also have your mind and your heart ready, so that if something hits, you're not in cosmic dissonance. You're not in shock, that you can deal with it and deal with it rationally. So you have to be prepared, not just by buying beans and bullets. It's with brains in your heart. It takes both of them and all of that. And it takes you being right with spiritually with whatever your source is. Now, I'm not here to prescribe that, but we've had people of different faiths. Paul is Jewish. And so I come from a Christian tradition, so it's it's different.
But we both eat cornbread.
We both eat cornbread. And there's hope. Maybe cornbread will save the world.
That's right.
So Paul, once again, what do you want to say about the cornbread?
I am living on cornbread.
Paul Cottrell is living on cornbread. Say that in the comments below, and we'll know that you went through this whole story.
Right, exactly.
Gold star for everybody that does that.
Right.
Or at least a big heart. So as long as you don't say something else crazy like the world's flat and this ain't going to happen, blah blah blah. We don't hear that. So don't just be be respectful, please, always in your comments of other commenters and Paul and the channel. And remember, this is a family channel, please. Just keep that in mind. If you lose sight of that, I will delete your comment. So you take care.
Thank you.
Oh, bless everyone. And I'm going to end the recording here. So thank everyone for watching.